Hei, kjære lytter, og tusen takk for at du hører på Henrik Beckheim podcast. Denne podden er folkefinansiert, og om du har lyst til å støtte arbeidet med denne podden videre, så kan du vippse et valgfritt beløp til vipsnummer 82 32 78. Jeg setter stor pris på enhver støtte du har lyst til å gi. Tusen takk.
I think we are sort of moving towards that, where most information is being shared verbally, in a form of conversation rather than written language.
That's very interesting.
And it's very fascinating, because in ancient Greece, that was like the main way of sharing information and ideas, playing with ideas. All of that was happening through like conversations, dialogue, the verbal language rather than written, orally, right? And we are sort of moving back to ancient Greece in that we are moving away from the written language.
We're coming full circle.
Yeah, we have went for circle. And, it's all thanks to technology, sort of. But there's also other ways in which we are moving towards the same type of society ancient Greece had, like asking basic questions. That was like the main role with like early like Socratic philosophy. It was basically asking those fundamental questions. And now we're back to that, right? We are asking what is a woman? Like when Matt Walsh made a documentary, we're asking very, very basic question, because I think we went through like, modern philosophy, what I'm calling post-Kantian philosophy, which is mostly existentialism, like continental philosophy, and then through like postmodernism. And what that created was sort of ontological chaos. And now we're back to those basic questions. What is what?
Yeah.
And the same with the question of consciousness, because the AI makes us rethink what consciousness actually means, what it means to be conscious. So we're asking those basic questions in the same way the Greeks did. And then there's the third thing, which is where we're sort of moving from monotheism to polytheism. And in a very Greek way, actually, because the Greek religion, the mythology, wasn't exactly based on the same fundamentals as Christianity or Islam.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this direct worship and obeyment of gods. They were more like icons of sorts. And like mentioned Marvel, right? And I think with superheroes, you're experiencing this sort of thing. Like they are those modern gods, where it's a new form of polytheism. And Greeks also had this very, very close connection to heroes. Hercules, Achilles, there's perfect examples, right? And we are going towards that ideal. So I think what is happening in this century is really fascinating in many, many ways.
But why do you think that is? Why do you think this is happening now, where, like you mentioned, Matt Walsh, what is a woman? Why we can't even explain that anymore? What has happened that has triggered this? What has happened that made the circumstances so that this is occurring?
Well, you have what was developed a very new way of viewing sex and gender. In a way, I think that sex and gender are different things, right? But the way I see it, like gender is funded on sex, because when we're speaking sex, we're talking like purely physical aspects for sexuality, or chromosomes, your genitals, like that's your sex. Gender is psychology. There's a term in the philosophy of mind called qualia, which is that there is an experience of being a certain being. Like being human comes with a certain experience, even though all of our experiences are different. There's something shared about it that is called a human experience, and you're unable to know what it's like to be a dog, because being a human is all you know. That's all your perceptions are limited to, like that of a human. And so qualia regarding gender is definitely there. There is a specific experience associated with being a man and being a woman. And that's what I think is gender. But where I disagree with a lot of like trans activists is that it is a form of identity. I don't think it is a form of identity. I don't think you can choose to identify as a specific gender. It is ingrained in your brain. And even if we're speaking of like transsexualism or gender dysphoria, people don't choose to feel like they are the opposite sex. It's not something you can just choose to identify as. And I think it really simplifies the whole issue of gender dysphoria that people are experiencing. It minimizes and reduces the whole problem to just identity, and I don't think it is an identity. So I think that is like the main reason why we are back to those questions, like what is a woman? And I don't agree with Matt Walsh and everything, but I think it's definitely an interesting question that he asks, and I think this conversation is needed.
Yeah, I think both the question is interesting, and it's also just as interesting that nobody can answer or dares to answer this question. I think it's more that they don't dare because they know the consequences, or they are afraid of the consequences they envision in their mind if they say like, a woman is an adult human female, is like, and then they envision like they're going to lose their job and be canceled. And that's crazy in itself that we live in a society where you would be canceled for saying that a woman is an adult human female. That's like, where are we headed? Like, what is going on here? It's like something is very strange in our times.
No, I can see what you mean. Like an adult human female is basically like the most common way of defining women, like historically speaking, right? So how did it go from a part where it was like a normal thing to being something controversial? And that's the thing with controversial. Controversial is whatever challenges status quo, basically. Anything outside of status quo is controversial, and because we have a new standard of sorts, it becomes controversial to have those ideas. But I mean, my personal take is that I want people to identify and express themselves however they want, but I think it goes both ways. So I don't think we should be limiting the freedom of people who disagree to express their own opinions.
Because I was talking to Helen Joyce the other day, and we were talking about how it's difficult to have this concept of self-identifying, because if you take the word identify, or the word identity, and the first part of that word is ident, which is also leads to identify, which is like it has to do with how other people identify things. Like it has just as much to do with other people as yourself. Like if I identify the green light to walk across the street as green and as like it means go, then it's easier for society to work if everybody behaves according to the same rules on the street or in the traffic and such. So it's like we were talking about how your circle of freedom ends where another person's circle of freedom begins, right? So if I choose, like the extreme examples is what we've seen in Berlin the other day, where like 100 people dressed up as dogs and were barking and being dogs. Like, it's like, okay, then I think like, yeah, it's a free society. You can do that if you want to and pretend to be a dog, but your freedom ends where you start to try to compel my speech to say that I also have to identify you as a dog. No, I'm not going to do that. I identify you as a person impersonating a dog. You can't dictate me and tell me that I have to do something, unless you're going to be punished by the state for criminal activity and hate speech if you don't agree with me being a dog. It's like you have your freedom, but I have my freedom too over my language.
Yeah, that was always sort of the main function of language, is to find common understanding, because our personal experience is so much different. If we didn't have an objective language, we wouldn't be able to understand each other, really. So that's like this common ground we find through language, right? So language is sort of empirical in that sense, and you see students, like pupils at school, who identify as either cats or dogs, and teachers are compelled to affirm that and treat them as such.
So crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to go full way, give them some dog food.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it becomes clear that you are not a dog, because dog food will be harmful for you. And your morphology is not the same as that of a dog, right?
And I think that a part of this is that we have got this whole system skewed, where we used to have, like, if you envision a pyramid of values, and we used to have truth on top of that. And now in society, we're very fixated on these things called empathy and tolerance, which are good. I'm not saying that they aren't good, but they're good values. But we go down a very strange path if we prioritize tolerance and empathy over truth. And that leads us to certain situations like, yeah, who am I to say that you're not a dog? I don't want to step on your feelings if you want to identify as a cat, rather than saying, hey, tolerance and empathy can also mean sometimes stepping on your feelings, especially when it comes to kids, right? And let's say a person with anorexia comes to a doctor and says, "Hey, I think my body is really fat and I feel fat. And do you think I'm that also, or should the doctor then just affirm that patient's feelings and say, yeah, you are kind of fat. You know, we don't do that. We bring them truth instead. You know, sometimes it's more." Let's use the word love. It's more loving to bring people the hard truth, and even though that might step on their feelings right then and there, in the long term, the truth is better for them.
Well, absolutely, and I think empathy should be founded in truth. First and foremost. If you're working with someone with a disability, you have to acknowledge that they have a disability of sorts. Now, let's say it becomes politically incorrect to say that. And let's say we should be treating a person with disability just like we should treat someone without a disability, a physically able person. Well, what does do that actually ignores the problem, that there is a certain struggle associated with disability. All right, so how are you supposed to help if you do not acknowledge that? No, I definitely. And in a lot of cases, I think this empathetic approach based in truth towards people who with like certain different gender identities can be useful. And I'm thinking especially of like the cases where people identify as non-binary. And I unlike many conservatives, I didn't necessarily think that non-binary is an inherently bad thing, because at its core, there are very few non-binary people who transition medically. And I think we should have as few people in society who are dependent on meds and who are going through those cosmetic procedures. So as such, it can be life-saving for someone to identify as non-binary when they are young. And I think in a lot of cases, you grow out of it. I think a lot of us play with androgyny when we are young before we settle into a specific role. That's okay. I think it's completely healthy to play with your so-called gender expression, right? But the problem starts when, if you consider those non-binary identities, there's this thing called gender fluid. For example, right? Where what it means is that one day you might identify as a woman, some other day you might identify as a man, or another day you might identify as something completely different than that. But there's two problems with that. Well, first and foremost, actually three. First and foremost, what is the third gender identity other than man or woman? So far, I've heard things like non-binary. But, well, what does it mean? What is a non-binary gender? Because if I were to tell you that I identify as binary, well, that means nothing. Which binary gender are you? Are you a man or are you a woman? Mm-hmm. So what is that third gender exactly? It hasn't been specified so far. We have like very vague, ambiguous terms to describe that, to omit the truth. Right, because there is no specific term for that. Or people might choose recently to identify as demons or cakes. Yeah. Right, and that is not gender. That is a specific noun that represents a specific substance. Yeah. The second problem with that is that when you feel like one day you are a man, the other day you're a woman, or it switches throughout the day. This is just a fluctuation in your sense of masculinity and femininity. And we are confusing masculinity and femininity with gender. I think those are two very different things, like every man has some level of femininity and every woman has some level of masculinity. Yeah. And it also fluctuates throughout your life. I don't know of any person who was like, sure, some people would say they are, but I think for a lot of people, it fluctuates throughout their life at least to some degree.
What do you think masculinity and femininity is? Because it's like these kinds of concepts that are kind of difficult to explicitly define because everybody knows to a certain degree what you mean. They can picture it. If you say like a really masculine man or a really feminine woman, you can picture it, but it's difficult to put into words and define it what it means. Okay. Let's have this as a challenge. What would you say that masculinity is if you had to put words on it? And what would you say the femininity is?
Well, I think I definitely think some of it is based in biology, but I think some of it is also based in culture. Like we have specific cultural expectations to what it means to be a woman or to be a man, and like Matt Walsh doesn't really take that into consideration in his documentary. That when we say that someone is a woman and someone is a man, we mean more to that than their physicality, their biological features. We're also talking about certain expectations to what it means. When someone tells you like, be a man, they don't tell you have bollocks in a cock.
No,
right? They tell you to behave a specific way, right? Or to grow up even. And in a lot of cases, I think it's associated with responsibility, masculinity. That is not to say that women can't be responsible, right? But culturally, it has been associated with that. And we have this term called toxic masculinity. And I certainly think that it is a thing. I think that certain aspects of masculinity can be toxic, but femininity can be toxic as well, right? And but I think there's some positive masculinity. There's you have to be a good role model to your kid as a father, right? And I think that is definitely one of the biggest issues in society, that men don't really know how to be fathers, how to raise their kids, right? And in a lot of cases, men would just leave that to a woman, and they would just be providers. And I think the role of a father is not limited to a provider. It is to guide their sons and their daughters as well to become a fulfilled moral human being, really. And that masculinity is needed for that, really.
It's almost like we demonize masculinity in our society nowadays. I really feel that everywhere. It's like if you're a man and you dare to show some masculine traits, it's like, how dare you be masculine? Don't you know that you have to be more feminine? It's like almost that kind of feeling without putting words, defining it explicitly. And I think that a lot of men is having difficulty, young boys, with the role of being a man, because there's no defined role model for what it means to be a good man. And in that vacuum, I think that that's why we see the coming forward of people like Andrew Tate, and that I would call like definitely toxic masculinity, because it takes some hyper masculine traits and using them in a really negative way. So I think that perhaps the closest positive masculine role model we have like nowadays, I would say like is Jordan Peterson, and somebody who praises exactly like responsibility that you were talking about.
Yes.
Put on as much responsibility as you can manage, and like grow up and take care of your life and take care of your children, take care and be responsible. And I think that is partly why he has such huge success also, because he becomes like an archetypal kind of good father figure that a lot of men in the Western world needs, because we don't have that, and it's like almost like it's outlawed to be a really masculine man.
I think it's interesting, and a lot of time I'm perplexed that someone would view someone like Jordan Peterson as a father figure. But I think it tells about a problem in society that like men are not doing the role as fathers, and there's an article about me in VG, like the biggest Norwegian newspaper. And the article states that when I was going through like this tough period in my life, I started listening to Jordan Peterson and did as he said. I cleaned my room, all of that. And, the article made it sound like I was some sort of like devoted Jordan Peterson follower or something like that. I'm nowhere near it. I have respect for Jordan Peterson. I agree with him on a lot of things. I disagree with him on some things as well. But I think it's like with everyone, you will find some common ground, and then you will find some things you disagree with. Yeah,
absolutely.
But like I'm not some sort of like religious Jordan Peterson follower. And like this newspaper completely misunderstood one of my videos in which I was talking about Jordan Peterson and took it out of context and presented it to the Norwegian public as such.
I tend to do that, putting things out of context.
Oh yeah, all the time. So I'm not a big fan of papers, to be honest. But otherwise, I think he can be a positive role model, even though I think some of his behavior is toxic as well. But I will take Jordan Peterson over Andrew Tate any day. I think Jordan Peterson represents this sort of positive masculine role based on responsibility, right? Whereas I think of Andrew Tate as a clown. To be honest, like he is a clown, and I think he represents like the toxic aspect of what is called like men's right activism, right, or manosphere. And I think one of the biggest problems with manosphere and men's rights activism is that it is so based in materialism and hedonism and sexism towards women as well. And that is a big problem, and we need to move away from that. Especially, I'm a big advocate for men's mental health. I care about that, especially queer men's mental health. I think that is something we really, really need to focus on. So, I think in many ways, the issue with masculinity is that on one hand, you're being demonized for being masculine, but then you're also being demonized if you stray from that masculinity at the same time. There's this expectations that you should not show any feelings as men, you should be stoic, and I think it can be harmful to some degree, but also to some degree demonizing men for expressing masculine behavior that's completely natural to them is just as bad. So it's like no matter what you choose, the society will demonize you as a man for whatever you do.
Why do you think that happened? How did it become that way, that masculinity was frowned upon and seen as something negative?
Well, I think it's a historical development in a way. I think, first of all, gender roles can be like very strict. And I think that opening more alternatives around gender roles is a good thing. But at the same time, when feminism became a thing and we started focusing so much on women's freedom to express themselves outside of that, the same has not happened for men. And some women will claim otherwise, but as happened on several occasions where a woman has left their husband because he cried after his mother died or after his dog died.
Crazy,
right? Like that tells you that we haven't done much when it comes to men's mental health and men's problems in society. We have very much higher suicide rate amongst men.
Why do you think that is? How come?
Well, I think it's two things. One is that men are more likely to succeed in
more aggressive
in a suicide attempt than women. So it's interesting to look also at suicide attempts, not just suicide rates. But those suicide attempts are still higher for men.
Is it because men, when we attempt suicide, we really mean it, we really want it to succeed, while as women is more like more of a cry for help, like a communication in it? Do you think that could be? I don't have any data on it. I just theorizing.
No, I think it could definitely be a thing, and we are also less likely to seek help. In a way, you're like and you're like sit with your problems. And another thing is that as a man, you have this role of a provider. Like you're supposed to be a strong one. You're the one that your wife is supposed to lean on, right? When she's going through the tough part. The kid leans on the mother, and the mother leans on her husband. That has been this historical system around marriage and male-female relationships for a long time. And when you are on top of that hierarchy in that way, you feel like you need to handle all your own problems, you're not supposed to show them. So we are less likely to seek help for that reason. And another thing is that, in general, psychology is oriented towards women. Therapy is oriented towards women. Same with education. Right? And that's why therapy doesn't work for a lot of men. That's why education doesn't work for a lot of men the same way it does for females. That's why a lot of girls do better at school than boys.
I know. But what do you think, while we're in the masculine female domain, how do you define femininity? What does that mean to you?
What does that mean to me? I think it means a nature based purely in compassion and empathy. I think femininity can also be strong. I think there's this weird thing that we associate masculinity with strength, and we associate femininity with weakness. I think they both represent two different kinds of strengths.
Yeah, we can get into that.
I mean, well, if you think about the role mothers play, let's not minimize it as something trivial. It's a really, really hard job to raise a kid as a mother. Whether you're a single mother or whether you're in a partnership and co-raising your kid, it's a tough job. And I think we haven't been appreciating the work that women have been doing for all this time. And I think it's good that women have careers. Definitely. I mean, we need more mind force and workforce out there. But at the same time, if I was to be a woman, which I tried to be for a while,
tried it.
Well, when you consider things like stay-at-home mothers, housewives, well, I think I would rather be with my kids as a woman than work at a store, a cash, or in a cubicle, telling me what my boss. I mean, doing what my boss is telling me to do. Hell no. I'm so fed up with this corporative system. To be honest, your family is much more important than that. And if you're and if you're passionate about something, if you're pursuing a career that you're passionate about, that's different. But just working for a specific corporation or someone and just going through your day like that and come home and watching Netflix, you want to tell me that is meaningful? Come on.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson been talking about that too. He was talking about how we have been lying to women in society, telling women that what you should pursue is a career and work as much as possible, money and careers, that is the most important thing. While in reality, a female superpower is being able to give birth and to create life. Is like we're minimizing that part of being a female and how important that is.
My take on abortion is that, well, I definitely think of it as murder of sorts. And I think in a lot of cases where people say that it is not a murder, that it is not a human being, it's because it is much easier to commit this sort of act as abortion if you convince yourself that you are not killing a human being. I mean, that is exactly what the people who were operating, concentration camp during World War II were doing. They just convinced themselves that Jews are not humans.
You always have to switch that mental perception of what it is you're interacting with.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there are some interesting pictures taken. It was from Poland. I'm not sure if it was Auschwitz or there was some other concentration camp, but it was somewhere in the south of Poland, and very close to that concentration camp. There was a resort where the Germans, the Nazis, were at. Yeah, and you have pictures from that where they had musicians there who were playing an accordion, entertaining. They were eating, they were dancing, smiling, and
oh shit.
You just see they didn't feel like they were doing something wrong. They were enjoying themselves, just 300 meters from that place.
That's like
a genocide was going on, right? But no, we're having fun.
That's like the ultimate taunt, or like them seeing that and then living in a concentration camp and like over there, that's like a theme park. Yeah, it's like the ultimate contrast.
Yeah. And I think if you see something like that, it's like staring into like the deepest darkness of humanity what we're capable if we convince ourselves that those people are not humans. And but so I view abortion in the same way, but at the same time, sometimes I think it can be a mercy kill of sorts. I mean, I have seen cases where the life of a child was so horrible and whose parents were so abusive, right? And in a lot of cases, thinking, well, I think it would be better if they were just not born. Right.
Yeah, I can understand.
So I don't. That's why there's an ethical ambiguity around natalism and abortion in general.
If I can try to philosophize a little bit around that too, I think a lot of the premise that you have to have as a fundament for antinatalism is that life is about joy and pleasure and having a good time and good feelings, and that is like at the top of the value pyramid for what it means to have a good life. And then I think that is wrong. I don't think we should aim for joy and pleasure and happiness in our lives. I think we should aim for meaning, and meaning is something that can sustain you even through difficult times, because meaning is not about having a happy, joyful life. It is about feeling that what you're doing is worthwhile and that you find a meaning with your existence, even though you're going through horrible things, right? So that is what can sustain you. Because if you place your fundamental meaning of life on joy, then that goes right out the window. Like the second you become ill, or the second a family member dies, or anything, you don't have anything if that is like the basic fundamentals of your life. So a meaning is much more redundant and much more resilient way to operate through life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that is my personal take on that too. And that is also like the way I've started viewing my life, maybe like 3 years ago as well, where I moved away from this utilitarian hedonistic view. And that is a very Aristotelian view, actually, like the concept of eudaimonia, like the good life, what constitutes a good life. And it's not based in like this joy, this carnal joy of sorts, right? And I think that's another way in which we are moving towards the ancient Greek society and culture, in that way, that we are beginning to value virtue ethics in a much higher way than we have done in the last couple of 100 years. Because, utilitarian ethics have been dominating in like the more modern history, right? Which are also based in materialism and hedonism in that way. And we are moving away from that. That is my perception of what is happening in society currently.
Because I think also hedonism is perhaps one of the root causes for all of this gender ideology that's happening. Because if you have at the base of your society like a fundamental axiom of saying that joy and euphoria is the ultimate goal in life, then you should like structure everything so that everybody's lives is like turning towards that. And then maybe the threshold for helping people experience whatever joy they can experience becomes lower, because nothing else matters but joy and euphoria and good feelings. So that is perhaps what is laying the groundwork and the fundamentals also for lowering the threshold for, let's say, operations for gender correcting surgery and everything, because this kid or this person has to have good feelings about themselves. So good feelings is the most important thing. So let's do everything we can do so that good feelings may transpire and be achieved. And then you throw truth out the window because that is what's the optimal thing to aim at.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually. And, what I find really fascinating is that, the opposite of what is considered gender dysphoria is gender euphoria.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of trans people using that term, like gender euphoria, when they transitioned or when they had surgery, and they're like, "Oh, I'm experiencing this euphoria."
Exactly, that's
like,
what they want.
Yeah,
that's
and what does it mean? Because I don't think a normal male or female experiencing euphoria around their own gender, their own body.
I don't do that every day.
No, I don't. I don't do that either. I have never done that in my entire life. Even though I have been trans for a while, but I never felt like this sort of euphoria. In that sense. I'm asking myself whether that euphoria is based in something sexual. Like there's this term called autogenophilia, which is basically like being sexually attracted to the idea of yourself as a woman. For men, for women, the term is called autoandrophilia.
Isn't that what you just called cross-dressers before? People who, like, really masculine men who were like, had this secret that they were dressing up in women's clothes, looking themselves in the mirror and feeling sexual feelings around that. And then perhaps they never told anybody about it and didn't act upon it other than that, but were like sexually aroused by the idea and the visuals of themselves in the opposite gender's clothes.
Well, I don't think that every cross-dresser is an autogenophilia. I don't think all of them do that for sexual purposes or sexual arousal, but a portion but I'm surely does that, and I don't think there should be anything wrong with saying that. I would get a lot of negative comments from like trans community for saying this, but instead I think we should just accept it. Like, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm aroused when I'm wearing women's clothes. What's wrong with that?
Fine,
like, go with it. Like, let's destigmatize that instead of saying that it never happens. Like, like no cross-dresser, no trans person ever experiences that. Some do, and there is nothing wrong with that.
And also, I think that it's really important what you're saying. Like, do that. Who cares? Whatever floats your boat. Because that also, what I find is that paradoxically, with the gender ideology that we're seeing now, is you making the categories more and more narrow for what it means to be a girl and a boy. Because, like, also what you're talking about on YouTube here the other day, I was listening to it today, is that once you have like a kid who's like a boy playing with a girl's dolls, like people be like, "Oh wow, maybe you're born in the wrong gender. We have to operate you. You have to get puberty blockers." It's like, no. Earlier times, like 20, 30 years ago, it was like, "Oh, that's a boy who likes to play with girly stuff. Whatever." It's like, this is a girl who likes to be a little bit more masculine. We used to call them tomboys. Yeah. It's like there was a larger spectrum of what it meant to be a boy and a girl. And paradoxically, it feels like that spectrum is growing more and more narrow, while at the same time we're talking about, everything is fluid and on the spectrum. But I find it like it's even more intolerant than it used to be.
Oh, no, exactly. I think that's one of my main issues with this modern take on sex and gender, actually. It's because it really limits to how you're supposed to express yourself as well. If you're like, if you show just a little bit of sign of anything feminine or anything masculine, like, you must be trans. Right? And no, I think that's so wrong. And again, especially a lot of homosexuals experience that as well. Where they were homosexual men who were experience some feminine behavior, exhibit that kind of behavior, and a lot of lesbians when they're kids, they would be like, what you call tomboys, right? And that is completely natural, right? Like when I was 9 years old, I was pretending to be a wife of one of my classmates, right? And when I was 16. I started looking back at that and obsessing about it. I'm like, well, that must have meant that I am meant to be a woman, which is not the case. But I interpreted it in such a way, combined with all the other feelings I was having around that time. And looking back, I think that was just a kid being a kid.
Yeah. Let's do your life story. I'm really curious to hear about it. Let's go back as far as you want.
We're taking this whole interview in like in a weird order.
Yeah, we do. I don't care. I like to let it flow naturally.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about your life story, and we can go back as far as you want to go back. But Let's start from like when you were a young kid, and where did you grow up, and how was your childhood, and what happened, and let's go back from as early as you
Of
want.
course. So I was born in Poland, right? So my parents are Polish. I have some Swedish blood in me as well.
Yeah, cool.
My dad's side, but
Where in Poland was this?
I was born in a city called Świnoujście, which is like all the way up north, close to the German border and the Baltic Sea, right? But when I was 4 years old, we moved from there to a very, very, very small rural town. It was around 4,000 inhabitants that lived there. I think my childhood was mostly very, very normal, except for one fact, and that is that I've been exposed to death at a very early age.
Why?
So, my grandparents from my mom's side, they were taking me to like random funerals when I was a kid, just complete strangers, right?
Why?
And I don't know why. Don't ask me.
That's strange.
My grandmother to this day denies that she ever done that.
Really?
I confronted her about it, and she's like, "That never happened. That never ever happened."
That's so strange.
Yeah, and you know, they were telling me, like, people get old and die, and I was 3 years old at that time, approximately, and I have a very vivid memory of that because I gained vivid memory at a very early age. I think around the time when I was 2 years old, I became like self-conscious because, you know, you have this, when you're very, very young, it's like you react to things around you. You are aware of your surroundings, even your parents, but you don't have this idea of the self.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I remember I have some memories from before I was 1 year old because I remember my walker I used to work as a child. Like, I remember it was green. I remember the colors and the details of it, all of that. I remember my first birthday, but it was around the time when I was 2 years old when I asked myself just suddenly out of nowhere, how long have I been alive?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I think this one thought signifies this switch from awareness to self-awareness.
Yes.
And after that, I went to my mom and I asked her, like, how long have I been alive? And she told me I'm 2 years old. And at that point, you know, 2 years old means absolutely nothing to me because I had no idea of those tools for measurement of time that have been, you know, culturally created, right? I hadn't had that concept in my mind, but I had some concept of time. So I asked my mom, well, what is 1 year? And she was saying, like, that's 365 days. What is a day? 24 hours. What is an hour? Later on, what is a minute? What is a second? And I was like, who decides that? And I think I've lost my parents at that point.
Really young philosopher.
Yeah, no, I was always meant for philosophy. Yeah. So I had this very, very vivid memory when those funerals happened. And you know, my grandma still denies that it happened, but it had such a negative effect on me. I would have panic attacks as a young child, where I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would start crying, I would be afraid of dying. I had this idea of me getting old and dying, and that was terrifying for me as a child. And
what did your parents say about them taking you to funerals all the time? Did they accept it? Didn't they know about it? Or?
Right now, my mom knows. But I think like, we don't want to create conflict in the family, so you know, we just sort of ignore that. And I think that's what a lot of families do. We just put things like under the carpet. That this problem doesn't exist. And I mean, I do have some feelings of sympathy for my grandma as well, because she's not a completely evil person, despite of her doing that. But I completely disagree with this way of, you know, raising your grandchildren.
Of course.
And, you know, it's those panic attacks I had. Also, I didn't understand the very concept of death as it is, as a natural thing. So I had this idea in my head that after you reach a certain age, when you get old, people will go like, okay, you know what? You are too old to be here, so we'll just put you in the coffin and bury you. And I had this idea that people were being buried alive in those coffins. So what I pictured in my head during those funerals were just people in there like screaming and banging on the coffin, trying to get out, and being buried alive.
Up, tell you that wasn't the case, or did you go around with those thoughts a long time? Here's the thing:
I don't remember exactly where I fully understood that concept. It's sort of like, well, do you remember when you've learned that Paris is the capital of France? Probably not. A lot of things we learn, we don't really have memories of that, and there's another problem associated with that. Well, if we don't remember how we know something, how can we be certain that we actually know something?
Yes.
But let's not go there for now, because that's a whole different discussion, right? But so I had this idea in my head, right? And when I understood the concept of death, and when I also began understanding the concept of where life comes from, how life is created, that made me associate my private parts with death.
Oh,
I mean, it is sort of a way to preserve yourself throughout that, right? And so I absolutely hated my genitals. It felt like I was thrown into a role I never ever asked for. And this brings me back to this concept of antinatalism. I didn't ask to be born, and I didn't ask to have those biological functions I had. I didn't feel at home in this role in a way.
See.
But other than that, I don't think I was exhibiting any sort of behavior at a young age that will point to me being trans or me being gay or anything like that. The only times I can think of is like when I was 8, I painted my nails, and I had like this acoustic guitar.
Yeah,
I couldn't play guitar at the time. I was just messing around with it. I didn't start playing guitar until I was 13, but a piece of that guitar broke. Right, so it was like this wooden part, and I started painting it with a nail polish. And then I was like, hey, you know what? Let's paint my nails.
Okay.
But again, that is just a kid being a kid.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, when you grow up, when you're in your puberty and you start to convince yourself that you are trans, you are sort of rewriting your own history because you're trying to convince yourself that you are something, and then you will look at those details and be like, oh, this here A means that B, right? You make this connection, and a lot of people who convince themselves that they have a certain diagnosis do the same thing. Where you look at those lists of symptoms and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm doing something like this, and you try to connect it, and that is not a correct way to diagnose anything.
No.
That's why I'm not a big fan of self-diagnosing yourself. You know, and there's a lot of people out there who will self-diagnose themselves as borderline, bipolar, or something. I even have seen self-diagnosed sociopaths. So
really?
Depression and anxiety is the most common. But I think that one is easy to self-diagose because it's more of a symptom, really.
Yeah,
so it's it's easier to tell if you're depressed or if you're anxious. Same way, you can tell when you're satisfied. You can tell when you're happy. You can tell when you're dissatisfied as well, right?
But do you think that self-identifying as different things is a kind of self-diagnosing? Is that related?
Oh, definitely. Especially since both phenomenons originated around the same time, really, and both had a lot to do with social media. Things like Tumblr and later, like now, TikTok. And there's this interesting phenomenon where what's it called? Like, let me think. Dissociative disorder.
Basically, have and feel like you're not part of yourself.
In this sense, dissociation can be understood like that as well, but clinically, dissociative disorder could be understood as feeling like you have like several different personalities. Like multiple personality disorder is that sometimes commonly called, and. You have those videos on TikTok of people obviously faking it. Like it's an obvious fake,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then you have a lot of young people watching it, and they're copying that behavior and self-diagnose themselves with dissociative personality disorder. And they're like, I have like 12 different persons living within me, and they're like doing those switches, and then they go into like those so stereotypical behaviors. And also, for some reason, a lot of those personas have their own gender identities as well, and it, you can tell it's manufactured, right? And another interesting thing with TikTok, for example, is that you have this spread of certain behavior associated with Tourette's, where you have kids watching people with Tourette's on TikTok, and then they start to exhibit those same behaviors, those tics associated
social
with
contagion.
Yeah. So there is social contagion around mental health. For that reason, I also think there's social contagion regarding gender dysphoria, or trans, and that's why I think it's so important to treat it as a mental health issue.
Because that's always the counter argument I get when I say, like, aren't you concerned about all this? Because if you look at the statistics of how many kids are applying for gender correcting surgery and puberty blockers now is like skyrocketing, aren't you concerned about those numbers? And the counter argument, of course, that I get is like, no, it just means that there's more openness to it, is more acceptance for being trans, and it's just about positivity and everything's open. How can you be so sure that that's what it's about, that it's not about social contagion and TikTok videos and youth and young people are having difficulties and mental disorders, and finally they have some kind of peg to put it on, and like something like you can put your finger on it now, and that's what's wrong with me, I'm trans, of course, and that will solve all my problems. It's like finally you take something that is very abstract, if you don't know what's wrong with you, or you have a difficult childhood and you have difficulties with breasts, or just being gay, a lot of people who are going through that kind of surgery, I've heard that they're actually, what they are struggling with is not accepting that they're gay, and then they think that they're born in the wrong gender instead. And so there can be so many different reasons why people apply and want to go down the path of trans and gender correcting surgery, and why wouldn't society be open to that, and instead of just saying that no, it's because of openness and acceptance and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think the two things are happening at the same time. Because on one hand, I do think it's a positive development that it is more accepting. Because a lot of more people open up about it. But at the same time, I also think there is this level of social contagion around it, and I think that is especially the case with very young people, with teens who are going through puberty. And puberty is a psychologically confusing period in anyone's life, really. And on top of that, if you add this element of social media to it, I don't think it's healthy. And I am, in general, very like techno-progressive. I am very positive towards technology, but I'm not very positive about social media. In general, especially the use, it has its function, but the use of social media in young people in general is not healthy.
Yeah, because young people are so lonely when they're using it. You think of it like the word social, and it's so great and social. It's not really connecting you. It's connecting you to a lot of other lonely people who are projecting their, like, the image of themselves that they want the world to see, but which is not always real, most likely not real. And that's a problem too, because we see that, like, apart from the whole trans and the gender ideology things, we see that in just ordinary stuff as well, like people projecting that they're living so happy lives and look at my perfect life, and then that in reality those people are sad and they're lonely and depressed, but they just want everybody else to see that they look so happy. Like, why wouldn't that apply also to this whole gender ideology and trans community as well, where people like take the case of people who have gone through surgery and talking about gender euphoria. Look how happy I am, and perhaps they're not even happy. Perhaps they're just projecting that they're happy and want people to be a part of a community, to not be excluded from the community. They want to say that they're happy when in fact they're not. Perhaps that could also happen.
Well, I have seen a lot of people who claim to have this euphoria, to be so happy about it, to have absolute mental breakdowns later. So I think there is, this the vanity on the surface, but there's a lot of pain underneath it, really.
Yes.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of trans people are also struggling, psychologically with depressions and a variety of different mental illnesses, really. And I think we do need an empathetic approach around it. And also, I don't think we should be viewing the fact that, well, I'm calling gender dysphoria as a mental illness. I don't think you should view it as a negative thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a healthy approach to the subject. And I think we should destigmatize it, just like, with the sexuality around cross-dressing.
Yeah. I think, why do you think there's so much of an opposition to saying that feeling that you're in the wrong gender is a sign of a mental disorder? Why is there so much opposition to that?
Well, I think it's mostly because trans people don't want to be seen as crazy, right? And I think that also is sort of a stigma around mental health, that if you're mentally unwell, it means you're crazy. And I don't think that's the case. I am mentally ill. I wouldn't consider myself... Okay, no, I do consider myself a crazy person, definitely. But that's...
We're all crazy in a certain sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I'm definitely not a normal person, let me tell you. I have never been. And the moment I've accepted that I am not a normal person, that I am not meant for a normal life, I don't function well at a normal life. The moment I accepted that was the moment where I could flourish as a person, actually. And, and historically speaking, there has been a lot of stigma around transsexualism. I mean, transsexual people have been literally locked in mental asylums previously. And there's this fear that if we start seeing it as mental illness, we are regressing back to that.
You're scared of that,
back to the 50s where we treated like that. But I don't think that's where we should be moving as a society. Instead of we should be moving into accepting it as a mental illness that can be treated. And I think that there's more than one way to treat gender dysphoria. And I think in some cases hormonal treatment can be beneficial. And I have seen people who generally benefited from that, And I'm not going, to be there and say that, nobody should transition because it didn't work for me, right? Like, my perspective is unique. It is my individual perspective. It doesn't say that everyone's experience will be the same as mine. But I think in a lot of cases, it is possible to treat gender dysphoria and through therapy, right? Like cognitive or psychotherapy. Yeah. Exactly. Because working on yourself.
Yeah, because I think there's a too much of an automatic jump from having a situation where like this. Okay, this kid is feeling born in the wrong gender and in the wrong body. We need to put him on puberty blockers. It's too much of a mentally automatic jump from seeing that situation, and that person should obviously have gender correcting surgeries. Like, we make those like 1-to-1 kind of ratio and saying that those two situations are the same. Like, what do you think? How much is like? Because let's take the position of the evidence, like evidence-based science, where I'm talking to Helen Joyce, as I mentioned, and I was asking, what does the evidence say about how many people are actually happier after gender-correcting surgery than before? And she says that we don't have a lot of data on that, and we have a Swedish study which says that a lot of people are like euphoric and happy right after, but we don't have any numbers for like long-term if people are really satisfied and happy and less suicides because of this. And she was actually, I think she was hinting at the opposite, that there were just as many or more suicides after gender correcting surgery. But I'm not going to quote her on that, but I got that kind of impression that at least it's not really that much better.
I think there's this phase, which I'm calling honeymoon phase of transition, where you're actually, you feel quite happy right after transitioning, especially if you're happy with the results. So that was the case for me after I started taking hormones, and I'm saying it in complete honesty that was one of the happiest parts of my life. Like this, the first year on estrogen. Absolutely, the best part of my life.
How old were you?
I was 19. Yeah, or like 19, 20, around that time. But things don't go so well like after that. And then again, I wasn't happy with the results of my surgery, so I didn't experience that honeymoon phase related to that. But if I was to kill myself after the gender reassignment surgery, when it comes to like data statistics around it, it'd be probably say that I killed myself because I couldn't take a stigma from society for being trans, and it is around that. Probably like no one, like it wouldn't be seen as a case of detransition if I did that. Like I regretted the surgery. Like that was the reason people.
Why
would think.
not? Why wouldn't they?
Because there is a certain bias there, and I think there's definitely a lot of research that needs to be done regarding the quality of life, like post transition, and regarding the number of detransitions as well. And I think this sort of research needs to be unbiased. I don't think it should be done by people who have a stake in either side, because when you want to, and that's a lot of problem with research, is that you have a starting point where you want to prove a specific thing. Like you either want to prove that like less than 1% of people detransition, and that almost everyone is much more happier after that. Or you might be on the opposite side and say like, no, like half of the people will detransition and nobody is happy. Everyone is suicidal after that. And you come with this certain expectation, and then you're doing research around this expectation to fit into that that place you've already created, right? And
that's think so unscientific. Like
very
process.
Very unscientific, and that is my issue with a lot of research that is going on like academic level. It is highly biased. A lot of research has been very politicized.
I get so disappointed about the academic societies and the research and the sciences. I thought that the level of research would be much higher, and the ethical standards would be much higher, and they would, of course, like that would be like number one thing, like check your own confirmation bias, check if you have some interest in the outcome of the studies. Like I thought that was like obvious to all research. Like how could any research be allowed to start if they have a confirmation bias of what outcome they would like to see? Like, isn't that like a red light? Like a red flag, like right off the bat?
No, absolutely. That is one of the reasons why I didn't come back to the university after I fell off because of addiction and depression. Because I was studying philosophy. I was doing bachelor in philosophy, and on third year I fell off. Right, my addiction was pretty bad, and depression. I was literally having seizures.
Really?
I started getting seizures around my second year at the university, mostly because there was just a lot of trauma that I was holding inside before, without letting it out, and it played out in this case where I
like panic attacks almost.
Different. Those were like bodily seizures, and they were focal. So it wasn't the type of seizure where I would lose my consciousness, but it was just focal, mostly to conceive to the left part of my body,
like muscle spasms.
Yeah.
Okay.
And at first, I was thinking I was having a panic attack, but then my left arm is completely normal. Why am I having spasm in the left part of my body? And also like here, the chest area, also. First time I arrived at the emergency center here in Oslo, they noticed, well, your hands are sweaty. You have a heightened high heart speed, and concluded panic attack. Here's the thing. I've just experienced one of the most terrifying things ever. And on top of that, I'm at emergency center, and I have this panic attack associated with any like clinics, hospitals after the gender reassignment surgery I had in this whole experience. So that puts me in the state of panic attack automatically whenever I'm in this type of setting, in this type of environment. So of course I'm going to have like symptoms of anxiety and panic in those situations, right? But like you ignore all of that because it's just, let's take a look at the surface, and that's the problem with like the health care system here. It's everything is done by the book. To point, like, I have zero trust in doctors or therapists, to be completely honest. And but yeah, so the reason why I didn't go back to the university after I get better is because I think it is an elitist circle jerk. I think it's a joke. I think it's a circus at this point. Not a big fan of academia, to be honest. And also not a big fan of those constrictions around how we are supposed to write. And if you look at a lot of academic texts, those are elitist texts that are written by academics for academics, and it's like, and a lot of the way it's written in such a way that it's just unreadable. It's like a government document of sorts. I think that text should be engaging and
tell a story,
entertaining. Exactly. And that's why I'm writing a book at the moment.
Cool.
I'm writing a book on technology and totalitarianism, and I want this book to be. Sure, it contains a lot of like complicated ontological concepts, but I want this to be accessible not only to academics but also like to normal people who might be like interested in philosophy, or it might even be an introduction to philosophy through a topic that is actually quite popular with technology. And it's not just concerning modern technology, but it's like technological evolution through history, and also like how we humans actually evolve through technology. Because if you think about it, there's a corpse that was found from a couple of thousand years ago that was frozen somewhere in the Alps, and on a genetic level, there hasn't been much evolution since then. Like the genetic makeup of a person from a couple of thousand years ago is identical to now. And yet a lot of people will say that we are evolving through reproduction. I don't see it, to be honest. I think the reason we are evolving is because of technology, and that has been happening basically since we started using fire for cooking. What happens is that, you have less, when you eat cooked meat, your body is using less energy on devouring and processing all that food, right? So more of that energy is being spent on organ development, and more specifically brain, which is the reason Homo sapiens came to be, why we have those cognitive abilities we have today. So and same can be said about like medicine and vaccines, all of that. We are evolving through that. We have always been evolving through technology, and there's a lot of negative views about transhumanism, and I think a lot of people have this idea of transhumanism as something out of a sci-fi novel, something very, very futuristic, cyborgs. It doesn't have to be. It can be something very practical, something very useful. Think something like a mechanical heart. How life-saving it can be.
We are almost transhumans already with pacemakers and with our phones in our hands.
It is.
We're cyborgs almost.
It's almost like an extension of you in that way. And it's all natural. But, some people say it is not natural for us to be disconnected to technology. Technology has always been a very natural aspect of being a human. I mean, that's what we are. We are morphing nature, and technology is nature. Like, technology is not something separate from nature. It is transformed nature. We are giving nature function, and we are evolving through it. And that has been the case always, ever since we started using tools, ever since we started using fire. And like mechanical hearts can be so life-saving. And also, out of all the organs, those are the ones who are easier to create, because a heart has a very simple function, and that is to pump blood. Right? It is easier to create a mechanical counterpart to a heart. It will be much, much more challenging to create an artificial liver, for example, or an artificial brain. If the point, like, are you still the same person if you get an artificial brain?
Probably not.
Like, will your consciousness still be there, or just some saved data around
Also
you?
fascinated by Elon Musk's Neuralink, when he's going to implement that, because I think he's doing some research in trying to give people who's never seen the ability to see, and the people who's never heard anything the ability to hear, and people who have broken their backs and are able to walk, giving them the ability to feel their legs and walk again. Like all of these things, I think he's experimenting with those things, and if he's able to do that, that would be like fantastic.
I mean, I see some good things about this type of technological development. At the same time, I have very little distrust towards Elon Musk. I think he's sort of a charlatan who's telling people what they want to hear. Right? Like, that's the thing with the elitists, and they take like a specific group and like his audience, in this case, like American conservatives, and he thinks like what they want to hear, and he gives them that like right on a plate, and he plays them like a piano, sort of, and I think, with this sort of elitism that we have, economic and political and technological, I'm worried about how technology will be used because, well, any technological implementation to your brain will be used to control you by the people in power, right? And that's why it's like my take on anarchism, because I'm an anarchist, and my anarchism is founded in transhumanism.
Yeah,
I think that transhumanism can happen only if we embrace anarchism as a society for betterment of humanity rather than control of humanity.
What's like your main argument for anarchism? Is it because of individual freedom? Like we live our lives how we want to without anybody telling us how to live? Is it like that kind of argument?
Well, yes, but that can also be a libertarian take, right? And there's a big overlap between libertarianism and anarchism. That's why, as an anarchist, I see a lot of overlap between someone like me and classical liberals. I think we are brothers in arms in that way. But where anarchism extends is that like we don't want any government, and a lot of anarchists are also anti-capitalists. On top of that, that's where actually anarchism originated. It was originally an anti-capitalist idea. It originated alongside Marxism. Really, like communism and anarchism. They share the same parents, you could say, almost. But there was definitely quite a disagreement between Marx and Bakunin.
Yeah,
because anarchism originated in Russia, and from what I know, like Russian schools teach a lot about anarchism, but we don't learn a lot about it in the West at schools. It's like it's not there. It's not in our school books.
But
right?
In anarchism, how do you deal with the problem of like thieves and criminals and people coming to steal and destroy? And it's like every man for himself. You have to just fight and fend them off because there's no police to deal with it. So. Or how do you deal with like practical issues like that?
Well, there's a big issue with anarchism, and I'm not saying that it's a perfect ideology. I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect political or philosophical ideology, really. But this is sort of a conclusion on my book. And for that reason, I am not willing to talk about this specific subject. No spoilers. Because I have a specific solutions to like improve on anarchism and the whole like plot holes it has and what we can do. Because you could say I'm not someone who is like deeply ideologically anarchist. I'm more of an anarchist out of necessity because I think that at this point with there's an evolution of power, and eventually we are moving towards a totalitarian state. And out of two evils, anarchism is better than totalitarianism. And
I kind of landed on libertarianism. I define myself. I don't define myself. I don't think define anything on a political spectrum. But if I had to choose, I feel like I land somewhere between classical liberalism and social liberalism, where there's a lot of focus on individual freedom, and I want the state to be as minimal as possible, get out of people's lives, and just do like the main, like the core things that you have to do, like fire departments and police and stuff, and just get out of people's lives. Other than that, and just as small as possible, and let the individual freedom be the main part.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're sort of in the same boat there, and I take it a bit to the extreme. You could say, but it's based on the same idea, and originally anarchists were very much pro freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Emma Goldman, Max Stirner, all of those people were very, very pro free speech. And nowadays, a lot of the time, people associate anarchism with Antifa.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of anarchists are in Antifa, and what we have Antifa coming in when someone is expressing an idea that the left disagrees with, and let's beat the shit out of those people. And that to me that goes against like the very foundation of what anarchism is. And even as an anarchist, I don't get along with a lot of anarchists. I think this whole idea of hiding behind a mask and vandalism is not a way to go. I think I think we should approach things in an intellectual way. And I'm like, yes, I am very, very anti-government. I am very, very much an anti-corporatist. Like, I don't vandalize public property. I don't hide behind a mask. Here I am with a name and a face, and I'm saying it openly. And I think, anarchism as an ideology can gain more respect through those type of conversations than if we get to be associated with this type of behavior. And because I am so pro freedom of speech, I want like everyone to have that sort of freedom. That's why I'm pro gay marriage, but I'm also, but I also support those like bakers who are baking, wedding cakes, who do not wish to bake a cake for a gay couple. They should have a right to that as well. I don't think the state should have the power to decide for people what they can or can't do.
Social correction than legal correction. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
because you'd always have somebody else who are willing to bake the cake, and then they get more business, and like the market and the social system corrects itself by that kind of standard.
No, absolutely. And the problem lies there if you're on the side where, if the government steps in and limits someone else's freedom and it benefits you, you're happy about it. But here's the thing: if the state has that type of power, guess what? They also have the power to take that freedom away from you.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't be too happy about it because you're next.
Yeah.
Like,
it's pure mathematics. It's like it's coming for you next just because you're happy now. It's like it's gonna hit you in the face. Because I think I'm a supporter of absolute freedom of expression and freedom of speech, except for the things that have been limited, which I agree with, is like inciting violence and threatening people.
Definitely,
I don't think that has anything to do with freedom of speech, because that's more of an act than speaking in itself. But except that, I think that you should have an absolute freedom of speech. And I think it's problematic that we've imported and included these kinds of hate speech acts in the limitation of our freedom of speech. So because who defines hate, right? Who defines what can be included in that kind of things? And also it's difficult if we're going to define it based on the subjective experience of people. Because that's feelings based, and then you're putting like feelings above truth, and then where's that going to land? Also, another part of it is like if you define this as hate, and then later on you create a precedence, and then later on, okay, what else can we limit? That it's like we start to think that way, and then where do you head? Like at the extreme, you can't say anything anymore because everything will be limited.
Well, like personally, I'm not a big fan of like actual hate speech, and what I mean by that is a direct attack on a specific group of people or a specific person, or incitement to violence. But the problem with like hate speech laws is that there's a certain level of ambiguity surrounding the very definition of hate speech, right? Who defines that? And well, is it something you're offended by? But here's the thing: everyone is offended by something else. You might say something to me that I will not be offended by, and then you might say something to someone else, and they will be offended by that. There's hard to find any ground in objective reality when it comes to those kind of definitions.
Why shouldn't people be offended? It's like almost like that is what you agree to. by being part of a society.
Yeah.
By being part of reading stuff, by listening to news, like reading books, is part of being a society is being offended sometimes because nobody's feelings are isolated from other people. It's like, and also great art. We used to say that great art is something that can provoke you.
Oh, yes.
That makes you feel something that perhaps offends you.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to limit art because it offended me when I watched a painting or a picture or a piece of music? We can't do that because that leads us down a very strange path towards totalitarianism, I think.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And general terms.
Yeah.
If somebody were to say like, okay, I don't believe that a man could ever become a woman, or the opposite, I don't believe that a woman could ever become a man. I just think that we can't have a society where we've limited freedom of speech so much that you're not even allowed to say that because somebody may be offended. But I'm not saying that we have that society now, but I'm just saying that
we're moving.
We can't have
we're
that
moving
society
in that direction.
Yeah, because that would be. How could we even have this discussion then?
Oh.
Because somebody might listen to this, and I'm going to file a report with the police. Then they are talking about trans, and I don't agree with this, and I feel offended. It's like at the extremes, of course, but we can't have a society where we can't talk about things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I think it's important to dare to be controversial.
Yeah.
Because it's through controversy that you challenge ideas, really. And I think it's so weird that we started to view being controversial as something negative, really. And not only that, but also as something very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think being controversial is necessarily associated with conservative ideas.
No.
Because there's a lot of very controversial liberal ideas as well.
Yeah.
And I myself possess some very radical, controversial liberal ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Even, my thoughts on euthanasia, which I support, and transhumanism, all of that. Those are like very controversial statements, right? Or that all drugs should be legalized, which also a stance I have. Controversial standpoints, and I think it's the same with like this gender and trans stuff. We should challenge ideas through daring to be controversial. And I grew up in a Catholic country, so there was a lot of this authoritarian take from the church, which was affecting my life and how I was raised, what I was learning at school. And I started to disagree with that very early, right? So I became like very critical towards religion, especially organized religion. And that was a very controversial take where I lived, at the time. So to me, it became a natural way of being to just be controversial and just not caring what anyone thinks.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think it's important because a lot of people are so scared, It's like a flock of sheep is like, oh, I don't dare to stick my neck out. I don't dare to say, what does everybody else say? Okay, I'll say that because that's the safest. Like, we're so safe-seeking species, And so that's important that you stick your neck out. If just for the sake of saying something else, like, I don't think we should move towards a consensus culture where everything is about everybody agreeing, everybody having a cozy good time because everybody agrees. There's no conflict. I think conflict is healthy for a society because it means that different opinions are meeting and being exchanged, and from that getting to a kind of a synergic state where you have something else come out of that wouldn't happen if we don't have a difference of opinions being exchanged.
Absolutely. I also think that's how society develops.
Yeah.
And without that, if everyone has to agree, if it's forced, especially by the state, that you should have this opinion, and everybody has that particular opinion. That means that the development of society will stagnate.
Yeah.
We don't want that, right? Like, I was interested in philosophy before I was interested in politics, and a lot of like my philosophical attitude I took with me when I moved towards more political topics, more political subjects, and in like philosophy, ideas develop through challenging ideas. There's a conflict, but there's this more humanitarian conflict and philosophy than politics. Like people are not at each other's throats to that same degree, and for that reason, I totally support freedom of speech of both like liberals and conservatives, and I think they're both needed. And both sides view each other in such a negative light. There's this black and white thinking, like, oh, everyone on the right is a shitty person, like everyone on the left is like this evil person. I think it's very unrealistic. I think liberals and conservatives, they have their functions, and they are needed. They absolutely need each other. First and foremost, we need liberals to challenge those conservatives' ideas. We need to challenge traditions in order to move forward. But then you also need conservatives, because sometimes, we have to step in and like, okay, we need to stop here and think it through.
And we also need to keep the things that we have made as a society and as a human race, and keep the things that are good. Don't throw the baby with the bathwater.
Absolutely.
Liberals will say, let's throw everything out, let's build anew, let's start again from scratch. It's like, conservatives come in and say, hold on, let's keep the things that are good before you throw everything out. It's like we need that balance.
Yes,
both of them.
Absolutely. It's sort of like a building, a sort of pyramid.
Yeah.
Where you have this foundation, and then you lay new things on top of that, right? And if you start removing this foundation, what do you end up with? Very, very thin tower. What happens then? Well, it all collapses.
Yeah, you need thesis, antithesis, and then
thesis.
Synthesis.
Synthesis. Yeah. That's the result of thesis and anti.
Yeah,
so that's very Hegelian.
Yeah. Dialectic.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick break, get some more water and stuff, and then continue. Yeah, back from the break. I was thinking about let's resume where we were originally with your life story. Where did we drop off at the funerals part that you were dragged around to, and then later on, just pick up where you left off.
Right. So, like moving on from there, and in general, I would say there are three main things that contributed to why I transitioned, right? And one of them was that negative view towards my own genitals, which was also associated with that experience with death, funeral. And the other two things are, well, they didn't become relevant until puberty. And one of them is the fact that I had a very, very high sex drive. But like my sexuality hasn't developed emotionally. So I didn't feel any sort of sexual attraction towards either males or females. But the sex drive, like purely physically, was there. And in my case, it was pathological, I would say, because I was masturbating up to like 8-11 hours a day.
Oh, really? How old were you then?
Like in my teenage years. Okay. I think it got really bad. I started when I was 14.
14, okay.
Yeah, and like 16, 17 was the worst part for me. And it got bad to the point where I was bleeding.
Really?
I developed blisters. I was ejaculating blood.
Oh, wow. Shit.
Yeah. But also, I didn't want to go to any doctor about it, because I was so dysphoric about my genitals that I didn't want anyone to look at them.
Oh, my God.
So I kept it all to myself, right?
Wow.
Absolutely horrible was what I was going through. And it was like so hard to control it. Like I was going, like sometimes I would do it like entire night from like 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning.
You didn't tell anyone about it?
No. And I would like orgasm 5 times during that one night. And then maybe have like 10 minutes break and go at it again.
Did you understand that you had like issues with it? Or did you understand this is normal?
I think I understood that it's not normal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very normal for a lot of teenagers to get engaged in that kind of activity. But like in my case, that was abnormal, right?
Yeah. And you didn't picture like a woman or a man or nothing. You didn't associate it with anything.
I don't think I've started experiencing any like sexual attraction towards people until I was in my 20s. Actually, so there was a delay there, right? And could be that it was associated with the fact that I have autism as well. I
You
have
do, yeah.
I have some degree of autism, and a lot of people with autism have like this delayed emotional development.
Oh, I see.
Right, so like intellectually, I was developing at a faster rate than my pupils.
How would you say that your autism affects you in your life? What kind of things that do you feel and experience different from people who don't have autism?
Well, I get very easily like overwhelmed by overstimulation with everything around me. So just like engaging in social life is challenging for me.
The small talk.
In that way, well, I mean, I manage that because you learn over time. You develop those skills by practicing it, and I think it is not an excuse to say, "Oh, I have Asperger's, I have autism, so I don't know how to interact with people." I think that is should be seen as a motivation to learn those skills. And that's why communication is very important to me. And a lot of people say, like, you're really, really good at communicating for someone with autism. Like, well, that is precisely why I'm good at communicating.
Because you're compensated for it.
Yeah. Like, I don't really read body language very well. And there's a lot of things that are being said that they just don't come through. And apparently people say that 90% of communication is happening non-verbally.
I see. Yeah.
But for me, it's all verbally. So I have to communicate absolutely everything through my words.
But have you been able to like intellectualize and like if you try to like concentrate on somebody's body language and do it like very consciously, be able to say like, okay, that means that means like
I mean,
by not feeling it like intuitively, are you able to do it like consciously?
Well, to some degree. I mean, I'm able to tell that if you're crying, you're probably something's wrong.
Probably sad.
Or like if you're smiling, you're feeling good. But there's a very basic. But I don't see many nuances other than that. I can tell when someone's like angry or sad or happy, and that's about it.
Okay,
that's about it. So I don't see many nuances there, but I pay a lot of attention to the way people move, even though there's like no meaning in communication there for me. I'm sort of face blind, so I don't identify people by their faces. Like if you were to put a group of people who are all dressed the same and they're just pictures of them, they're all bald. And all I see is just their faces. I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. A lot of faces look the same for me, so I pay a lot of attention to things like their hairstyle, or the way they dress, the way they move, the way they smell. I identify people by their smell.
You do, yeah?
I'm like a dog in that way, and I have a very strong sense of smell.
Yeah, really.
And it's same with sexuality for me, where a lot of like sexual attraction for me is about the way people smell.
Interesting.
Like I'm not attracted to the way people look because everyone looks the same for me, right? Yeah. So I get attracted to like people's voice, people's smell, the way they move, things like that.
And their intellect as well. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And also, what was I thinking about? The autism, is it, how early did you know that you had autism? Were you diagnosed early with it?
No, not at all. I was diagnosed when I was 22.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Nobody suspected you having that earlier?
Well, I was seeing a psychologist when I was 12, so there was there was some suspect that I was different from other kids, right? I was some suspicion there, but I guess I always knew something was different about me, but I didn't have a specific word what I should call it, right? But I always like perceived both communication and social interaction and friendship in different way than people around me. So I have very hard time developing friendships, actually, because I'm good at this sort of like shallow conversation with like I exchange ideas. I will interact with people when we have like some common goal, work together for something. But other than that, I have a hard time like connecting to people on a deeper level.
On an emotional level, you think? Or is that what it's about?
That too. I definitely connect easier through like on an intellectual level than emotional level. I mean, I do feel attachment to people. I'm not saying that I don't, but even when I see attached to someone, their presence overwhelms me. So I'm like, if I see you 3 times a year, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, like
you don't need
more than that is just overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, I had this idea that I wanted to have my own family, like, right? But I can't see myself having a partner, having someone being constantly around me all the time.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's way too much.
Do you enjoy alone time, being by yourself?
Yes, and I'm also like most productive. Most my energy is at its best when I'm just being left to my own devices. When I'm just at home and working on something.
But do you have the ability to feel lonely? Do you ever feel lonely, or do you don't feel lonely?
I do. Yeah. I do experience loneliness on like existential level.
Yeah.
That it's sort of very hard to connect with people on like soul level, right? So I do, but
it's such a paradoxical state by at the same time being overwhelmed by having people around you, and at the same time feeling lonely because you're not connecting.
Yeah,
it's like the opposites.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a paradox of any sort. I think it's very common.
Yeah, that's
actually.
true. That's true.
It's very, very common.
Being lonely around lots of people.
Yeah, and you know, having autism doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be an introverted person as well. No. And there's a lot of people say that there's like the same things. No, I'm pretty extroverted for someone with autism. I'm a very extroverted person, but like I have autism, so the way I interact is and the way I relate to people is different.
Yeah. But let's go back to the timeline again of your
of course. I have this tendency to sidetrack.
No, but I like that. That's what we do in this podcast anyway. I like to go into directions and all. I just try to get back to the course we were on, just to find a red thread. But we were like at the age of, what was like 12 or something. You're talking about this excessive masturbation and this whole period of your life. And then moving on from there, what happens?
Well. Even before that, there was this aspect of bullying that I received at school, at middle school.
Yeah,
which started getting really bad around the time when I was 13. So,
what were they bullying you for?
Just not being manly enough. So I was, and you know, I ended up hitting puberty later. I was kind of like, I think it's like, like I said, I started masturbating at the age of 14. I think for a lot of boys that happens earlier than that. And I didn't really like develop any particular masculine features yet, nothing of that sort. So I looked like a child around that time. And, you know, that in and of itself makes you a target.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, you're smaller, you're... probably like, you know, more vulnerable in that way. So people would pick up on you for that reason. And on top of that, I was read as being gay. And that environment I grew up in, it was very, very homophobic. Yeah. And at that time, I didn't even think of myself as gay. But I've heard a lot of people saying things like gays deserve to die.
Really?
Yeah. Shit. And not even the word gay, but like YouTube, it's going on YouTube. So of course YouTube doesn't like it when you use words like that, but like the F word for gays, you know, that is, I was called that, like F words deserve to die. I hate them, things like that. You know, and when you're told that, well, the way it affects you, like even to this day, I feel some level of shame regarding my attraction towards men, right? And it has even been the case where I was dating a guy and I would just drop it because subconsciously I was thinking, and it was after I detransitioned, but subconsciously I was thinking like, I should be with a woman because like, I'm a guy, I need to prove something. And it's stupid, of course, now that I look at it, but I used to do that quite a lot, you know. And when I was in middle school, I was told that I could never possibly be a real man. I could never get a girlfriend. And when you're told that, you feel like you have to prove something. Like, oh, no, I can. I'll show you, right? And then, so like a lot of those short, very, very short-term flings and relationships I had with women were very, very fake. Because it was based on this idea that I should just show. That, just prove that. And like times in public when I was holding a girl's hand or had my arm around her, there's no like, are people seeing this? You know,
just for show. How many points do I get today?
Something like that. But it was never about her.
No.
You know, it was about me and people around us. You know, like it's sort of like a status trophy of that sort. I don't do that anymore.
No.
Like I moved on past that, so I don't.
You feel less of a stigma just being attracted to men, like here in Oslo, in Norway, in 2023. Is it easier now than then?
Yeah, definitely. But you know, some of that influence is still with me on some levels. Like like I said, some level of that. Shame is still there. I'm working on it. I'm working on it and trying to get better around that, you know. But yeah, like back then when I was a teen, that affected me in a very, very bad way. So in general, you know, I started to think that I should have been born a woman, that life would be easier for me. I would fit into that role much better than if I was born a guy.
I see. So it actually was like the feelings of being gay. You converted that into thinking that I should be a woman instead. Was it that which started the feelings in you that you should go for trying to be a woman?
Well, I wasn't aware that I was attracted to men because, like I said, that attraction for me was delayed, sort of. So it didn't develop until I was in my 20s. And that's when I started getting actually attracted to men. And it's especially after I went on testosterone. I was on testosterone for 2 years. No. 3. I think it's from between 2019 to 2022. And in that period of time, it became very apparent for me that like my sexual attraction is exclusively to men. And you know, I don't even use the word gay or homosexual. No. The term I prefer is actually androsexual. And what that means is attraction to masculinity or attraction to men. And if you think about it, both gay men and straight women have the same sexuality. And that is attraction to men. So why call it heterosexual or homosexual? True. It's androsexual. You're attracted to men. It's the same type of sexuality. And the opposite of that is gynosexual. They both come from those Greek words for men and women. Andro and gyne. That's where they go, like... A gynecologist is coming from. Also androgynous, like a combination of the masculine and feminine.
But when did the whole thing when did your journey start with the idea of going towards a path of being trans, of gender correcting surgery? When did all this start? What was the start of this?
That was around the time when I was 15. And that was already that I was towards my second year of middle school. And at that time, like I said, it started with this idea that I should have been born a woman, that life would be easier. And then I started looking at those small details from my past, just looking for something. And I wasn't even familiar with the term trans at the time, because it's not like it was out in the open that it was something I knew about. You know, it's a very different cultural context there, and there's a lot of misinformation about me out there in like different articles. I've read about myself that apparently I was indoctrinated by social media. I wasn't even on social media at that time. I wasn't using social media, and there's also like someone wrote about me that I transitioned because I was shamed for my masculinity, that my masculinity was toxic. I was shamed by feminists. That was the reason I transitioned. It's like people who write that had like zero cultural context around the environment I grew up in. right? And knew absolutely nothing about my own life. I don't know why. There's like so many weird theories.
People just
about
projecting
me.
their own thoughts onto you
Yeah,
about what they think.
yeah. I also read about myself that apparently I am straight, and that apparently I had several different surgeries, which is not true. I've also read that I'm apparently against people transitioning like completely, which is also not the case at all. So yeah, I think it's entertaining in a way to be reading those things about me that I didn't even know about myself. You know,
it's like the new creative thing every time. Okay, let's see what this reporter is saying.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that about me. Cool. But okay, let's go back. Like at 15, you started having these thoughts and feelings that you should be a woman instead. And what happens next? Do you say this to anybody? Do you say this to your parents? Like, who do you tell about these feelings?
Well, at first I didn't tell anyone, right? But I started to doing some digging on the internet, and there were like a couple of internet forums I came across, you know, and one of them was, I think it's called Susan's Place. It was a very very well known trans forum at the time. I think it still exists. I don't know. I haven't been there for a long time. But like, you know, I shared my story and my thoughts, and I was there, and I also like learned what it means to be trans, what it means to be transsexual, and I sort of, you know, I felt at home there at that time.
A sense of a community?
No. I never had a desire for a sense of community. I think that's definitely, you know, this autistic part of me. Like I'm a lone wolf. I never had this desire to belong, or to fit in that sense, or to have a community. And you know, in a way, that's a good thing because that makes you think for yourself. Like I don't pander to a specific community just to be accepted by them, you know, and I don't really fit into a specific community for that reason. I think it was more about finding peace of mind for myself. You know? And you know, a lot of people say that people transition because they want to feel different, like special. For me, it was the opposite. I felt like I was different, so I wanted to transition so I could feel normal. You know, like that would be a more natural role for me to fit in if I was a woman, right? So I wanted to be considered normal by society. Now I understand that feeling of, you know, being different also had to do with the fact that I wasn't straight and with the fact that I was autistic. But, you know, the way you interpret it at that point, right? Now. And
as a side note, I also want to say that I just read that a symptom of a symptom of being autistic at the age of like preteen or puberty is like also a clear, distinct feeling of not belonging in your body. That could be a part of being of having autism, and that this is not something that we know a lot about, especially in connection to the whole trans and gender correcting surgery and that whole field. So that's a really big like. A big gap in the knowledge base, but that we don't know anything about, which is really, I would say, it's really complicated, and that makes things complicated that we don't know enough about this whole, the whole theme of not feeling at place and at one with your body.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And a lot of people with autism experience that, and I guess I still experience that to some degree. Like you know, I don't. A lot of the time, I don't feel like my body is my own. Like I don't feel like I am my body. Like I'm something outside of my body. Like just pure consciousness, you know, without any particular form. And also, I've heard a lot of people who are on the spectrum say that sometimes they literally feel like they are outside of their own body. Like that's very common. I haven't experienced that personally, but I definitely have felt this feeling that something about my body feels foreign, almost alien, like I don't belong in it. You know? And well, when you have that on top of, you know, frustration with your own sexuality and the feeling that you're not good enough to be a man, so you probably would make it better as a woman. Definitely like forced me in that direction of transitioning, you know. And just because I was around those transsexual forums at the time, it's not the case that I was like indoctrinated into it. It's not the case that I was like indoctrinated into an ideology. My transition had nothing to do with an ideology. It had more to do with like escaping myself and my own reality in that way. And I think it's really easy to blame the internet and social media, right? It's sort of like, well, before that, what were we blaming a lot of the time? Video games, music, like Columbine shooting. Right?
We're always blaming something.
Oh, I mean, those school shooters, they were listening to Marilyn Manson. That must have been the reason why they
cancel Marilyn Manson.
Did that. No, exactly, right? Or before Marilyn Manson, you had, Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, and, regarding video games, it was Grand Theft Auto, which was being, so that turns young people into like criminals and school shooters and all of that. And when you focus so much on that, you are ignoring these nuances in their upbringing, their environment, and their psychology, which I think there should be much more focus on rather than scapegoating of this
definitely.
sort.
Having a more nuanced look at it.
Yes,
there's different parts of it.
Absolutely.
But let's go. Okay, so you're 15. You're having these feelings. Like, when does your like medical part of this start? Do you tell your parents, or do you go to like a clinic or a hospital or a doctor, or what happens that takes you to the next step of starting this journey?
So I told my mom, right, and my mom was completely shocked by it, right, and I didn't tell my dad, but he found out through my mom, and my dad wasn't happy about it at all. But they were like, wait till you're 18. You're not allowed to do anything until you're 18. After that, it's up to you. Like, we're not going to stop you. But they were certainly like weren't supporting that decision. And looking back at it, I understand that and I sympathize because it is quite shocking to find out that someone who you thought of as your son now wants to be a daughter. And I think we're demonizing parents who feel this way too much because almost nobody wants their kids to be trans. If you think about it, it's not a healthy state to have gender dysphoria, right? And then you're probably going to have a much tougher life because of that. You're going to be dependent on medications and all of that. Like, I wouldn't want it for my own kid if I had a kid, right?
Obviously.
I think, if someone literally says, I want to have a trans kid, like, you're doing that for yourself, not for your kid, right? Yeah, definitely. And it's like, it's this sort of virtue signaling, like, it's not about your kids. You just want to show the world that, look what fantastic father or mother I am.
I have tolerant I am.
Yeah, all my kids are trans. All my kids are non-binary.
All of them.
Right? And it's very similar to what I was doing when dating women. Right? It wasn't about
same
them.
thing.
It was, it's exactly the same thing in that way. But
what do you think about your parents saying you should be 18 before you decide that? Is that something you would endorse? Do you think that should be a general 18 years of age limit to doing something like this?
Yes, in general. Yes. I think that, in certain cases, when someone had a feeling of gender dysphoria since very, very early childhood, I'm okay with starting hormones at 16 in those cases. And that is actually what has been practiced in Norway for many, many years. We had this system. I'm not saying the current system is perfect because there's a lot of things that are wrong with like the national Rikshospital, right? For instance, they have like very, very strict views on what it means to be a man or a woman regarding like cultural gender roles. And for that reason, a lot of trans people who apply for that treatment have to lie and they like exaggerate to get that treatment. That is not good. Like you come in with this expectation that you have to lie. And that when you detransition, you also get shit from them. Because, you weren't honest with.
That's the only reason why you would
yeah,
detransition.
Yeah, but here's the thing: like, where if the main expectation you start with is to not be honest, well, that's not good, right? And they have also been like forcing trans people to sterilize themselves.
Really?
Oh yeah, up until I think 2016
Jesus,
or
why?
2017. It was like, well, if you want to legally change your sex, like your personal number, right? Well, you have to go through the surgery. Like you have to either remove your testicles or your eggs in order to do that. And I think that I'm opposed to those surgeries. I'm okay with like hormonal treatment, even though it also comes with certain side effects. But I wouldn't recommend anyone getting those surgeries. I think we should minimize that. And what Rikshospital was doing is the exact opposite. It was fortunately there's only one true way to transition, and that is through the surgery. I don't think that's the case. I think for a lot of people, it's okay to just transition socially. Like dress and express yourself how you want. And there are people who transition medically only because they experience some level of stigma from society. So that they transition because they want to pass, because otherwise, they get a lot of bad comments and all of that. And that is the reason they transition.
I would say that too, like it's best to be on the most conservative and careful side when it comes to something that has so much of a radical and detrimental effect on your body if it shows that it's wrong, right? So I would say, like, obviously we should encourage like social transition first, like try that first, like for some years, like perhaps that is enough for you, and even perhaps then you find out, no, I wasn't a woman after all, I wasn't a man after all. I go back and then no damage has been done. Like, oh, okay, a lot of people think you're a woman or a male, but at least no biological or physical medical damage has been done to your system.
Exactly.
Like just for being careful, just for being prudent, and like the doctor's Hippocratic oath is like, do no harm. You should start there.
Yes, absolutely.
And also, but let's go, okay, so you tell your mom, and then what happens next? Do you contact like a psychologist or a hospital, and also where do you live at the time? Is this in Poland as well?
No, I moved to Norway.
To Norway then?
When I was 16.
16, okay.
So I was living in Telemark at the time.
Why did you move to Norway?
Well, my dad was working here since 2005.
Okay.
So it's not like Norway is a completely new experience for me. When I came in 2009, I had connection to Norway since 2005. Basically, that's when I was here the first time.
Yeah.
And first, I was obviously like doing some research on how do you proceed with this? How do you get this treatment? And what happened is that I went to a psychologist working at this like a health clinic for youth. And apparently, like that sort of psychologist cannot send you further to Rikshospitalet.
No.
So I was from there. She told me to go see my GP and my doctor. And so I talked with my doctor, and I explained that I feel like I'm a girl. That I want to be a girl, and he tried to send me to like the psychiatric district so that they could send me to Rikshospitalet, but I never got there. And not just to Rikshospitalet, I never got to talk to any like professional psychologist. Actually, it stopped at my doctor. And when I got the letter in my my parents' post box, because I was living with my parents at the time, and denied. And it was like every time denied. And well, what this shows is that it's so hard to get any sort of psychological help in this country, And I think the first time I actually got to talk to a psychologist to go for some sort of therapy was in 2001.
Wow. But
that's 10 years since the first time I tried, first time I applied. I was denied every single time. And if I got help much more earlier, a lot of things would have been avoided.
Yeah. So 2000. You mean 2011 or 2000? Is it 2001?
2011.
2011.
Yeah, 2011 is when I applied first time, and that's also when I started the process. And and that it is a problem because things have to get really, really bad before you get help. I think we should be more focused on avoiding this sort of scenario where things get really, really bad. I had to hit a rock bottom. I like an overdose, things like that, before I actually got any sort of help.
Jesus.
But
what did they, when they said, like, when you get the letter of denied, what is it that they denied? Did they deny, like, getting you on a path towards treatment of gender correcting surgery, or did they deny just even talking to you? Just that?
Yeah. And there are just like no explanation there. And even when I later tried to apply for like other reasons, right, like traumas and anxiety and depression, every time it was just denied. That's so
crazy, because you were 16 at the time, or
I was 18.
18 then. Because I think that just having a young person just exhibiting and communicating these thoughts, whether or not you're actually ending up getting some kind of treatment or surgery is almost irrelevant. Just the fact that you have these thoughts would definitely communicate that you should get someone to talk to. Is like what I would think that any normal person would think. In my assessment, like, you should definitely be able to see someone that is not, it's not ordinary that people feel like they're in the wrong gender. Like, you should have some help.
No, I mean, I agree. I think like you said, every normal person will say that. I don't think they're normal people.
Yeah. Average people.
Yeah. No, I mean, the problem is that also like the whole like psychiatry in Norway is so overwhelmed. There's not enough people working there, and the way, like, you don't really go through therapy here. They just try to diagnose you, eventually put you on certain meds, and out you go. And there's a limit of time how long you can be in DPS. Right. You might be there for a couple of months, and that's it, because there are certain limits. And I say we need more psychologists here. And I know so people who have studied psychology who can't find any job. Right. So there's demand for more psychologists because there's not enough psychologists or therapists for the patients. And yet there are so many who don't have a job.
That's strange.
After they study.
Is it because they have to save money and they have to fire people and they have to downscale and downsize? And
probably, yeah.
Shit,
yeah, it boils down to all of that. That's quite an issue, honestly. And a lot of therapists here operate the same way as medical doctors do, and that is like everything is done by the book.
Yeah.
Right.
But did you ever get an explanation for why you were denied, or was it nothing?
No, never.
But after a while, then you obviously got into the system somehow. What happens next?
Well, it wasn't through Norway. But, I had Polish citizenship. So I was thinking like, well, I have rights to be treated there just as much. So I found, and there is no such thing in Poland as like nationally funded public treatment for patients with gender dysphoria. So you have to go private. You have to go to a private doctor. It was affordable, I would say. But, it's definitely more expensive than if you were to go public. But it's also Poland. Poland is not a very expensive country. So
what was the process like there? What did you have to go through? Did you have to go through therapy? Was there requirements? What happens when you contact them?
Well, there was no therapy. We had one conversation. I think it was on Monday sometime in April 2012, early April. And so we had this conversation on Monday, this appointment. and I, basically just asked questions like, "Do you feel like you're a woman?" And from the moment I've entered the clinic, I was addressed as a female. Every single way. So it was very affirmative. Like you meet there, and I can tell that he had this goal in mind to put me on hormones from the moment I walked through the door, or even before that, like from the moment we exchanged emails.
Did you find that a positive experience that you were addressed as female and being affirmed that way? Or was it strange, or do you remember?
I like that, but at the same time, it was strange because it never happened to me before. So it's like a bit of a shock, right? Like everyone always addresses me as he, right? And but no, it felt good, certainly, even though it felt a little strange. But back then, and it's all really a matter of perspective. Like if you're in this situation where all you want is to get the hormones as quickly as possible, oh, that's a good thing. If you look at it that way, it's sort of like with a drug addict. Like, and you want to get
just get the pills.
Just get the pills, get the dope. That's all you care about, and that was all I was caring about at the moment. But even then, I was like able to tell, like, this is quite unprofessional, really, like, and there was no digging into any specific reasons why I wanted to transition.
Almost like no requirements, just okay, you want to do this, let's go.
Yes,
it was like that?
Yes. Very, very short conversation. Like in total, I talked with you more than I talked with that doctor.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah.
Oh my God.
So, and all I got from him is like the list of like specific tests I was supposed to do. Included blood work, a brain scan, and like eye inspection.
Why?
Well, mostly to exclude the possibility that I had some sort of tumor.
Oh, I see.
There are apparently specific tumors which can cause the experience of feeling like you were born in the wrong gender or the wrong sex. And, I think it's funny that we take into consideration those physical possibilities why you might feel this way, but we don't really take into consideration the psychological
and
reasons.
autism.
Autism, or like, you might just be a guy.
Yeah.
Or
did he ask? Like, are you sure? Not
or in case of a lot of females, well, a lot of young girls experience sexual assault.
Yeah.
And then they want to transition because they feel so vulnerable with the idea of being a girl, a woman, growing into that,
It's so irresponsible not addressing all this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
So crazy.
It's like, well, you have developed a way of dealing with that trauma. You want to escape your womanhood, right? Because, and, in a lot of cases, girls get sexually objectified at a very, very young age, right? And you don't want to be seen that way. So, you escape into manhood to hide from that. In a way, something similar happened to me in the sense that I wanted to escape my manhood because I wanted to escape my sexuality.
Yes.
That was so frustrating for me. And I sort of wanted to regain that idea of innocence, that going back to what I was when I was a kid, before puberty hit, before I started feeling horny. I wanted to go back there. So when I first started taking estrogen, one of the first things that happen is that your sex drive goes down.
Yeah, so you were probably happy about that.
I was very happy about it because I no longer. I mean, my sex drive was completely dead.
You were like
more than ever before or after. So that was very, very freeing. And I developed sort of an idealization of the asexual identity, sort of, even though I was having very high sex drive, I had this ideal in my head of an asexual person, right? And that was something I wanted to move towards, also for moral reasons as well. Like I have very conservative views on like sex and monogamy in particular. So even though I'm quite liberal in some ways, in some other ways I'm actually more conservative than conservatives, especially when it comes to sex. So that felt good. That felt good to not have to deal with that sex drive. But yeah, going back to why young girls transition because of sexual assault, it's absolutely terrifying that we are not addressing the issue and just letting people transition. Because I think in some cases you might have a good reason to transition if that is what you want. I'm not against it, but I think we need a responsible approach to that, to just find out if people have some sort of traumas or internalized homophobia that actually forces them to do that. And actually, since I started making YouTube videos, I have had people contacting me or even commenting on my videos where they said that they had they too have like internalized homophobia and consider transitioning because of that, and that they changed their mind after listening to me. And to me, having this sort of ability to have someone out there avoid the sort of fate I've met and just accept themselves as gay at that early age, it's probably the best thing I have ever done in my entire life. And if I was to die today, I would be sort of satisfied with what my life was for that specific reason, to help people in that way. It's the best feeling ever, and I think that's what I consider as, being mature, being an adult, is seeing that you are temporary and you need to work for something that lasts longer than you. And that ties back to what we were talking about, like the meaning and responsibility, right? And for a lot of people, we sort of do that by having kids. Like we're looking forward to some responsibility that goes beyond yourself, something higher than yourself in your own life, your own pleasures. And I think that's when you realize that is when you truly mature. Like when you take that responsibility. And I may not have kids on my own, but I'm taking responsibility for some higher purpose that is more important than me and my own temporary existence. But by doing something like this,
That's almost like a different definition of transhumanism, in the sense that it could be called transcendental humanism, where you're trying to try to transcend something and think of your life as perhaps time limited, but you can do something that is more important than your own individual life, which will last longer than you and affect a lot of other people other than you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have always been doing that. Otherwise, we would never progress as a society, whether culturally or scientifically or philosophically or politically. I mean, if we all just cared about what's good for me in this here moment, we would never leave our caves.
Yeah,
really, it's that drive that drives society forward in that sense.
Also, but you're with this doctor, 18 years old, and you fill out a lot of paperwork probably, and then what happens? He just says, "Okay, let's do it. Let's go." You get puberty blockers also, as well as the.
I mean, puberty blockers. I wouldn't really use that word.
No.
But it's like an anti-androgen is what it's called. In practice, it's puberty blockers, but you don't block your puberty when you're 19.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I was put on anti-androgen and estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Other than those couple of tests I had to do that I mentioned, I also had to just fill out like this psychological test that had like multiple answers. Usually, I think there was just yes and no, yes or no. That's all you do, and those were questions mostly based in like very stereotypical behavior, like do you like to wear men's clothes, or are you attracted to men, things like that, or who do you identify with when you're watching films, like the male hero or the damsel in distress, That's such a stereotypical. That's a very archetypical way of viewing it. And even a lot of women don't really identify with the very archetype of a damsel in distress. That is one of the big issues with like Hollywood and video games. The portrayal of women. It's like I'm picturing like Super Mario back in the 80s, right? You had a princess trapped in a castle by this big dragon, and you have this Italian plumber coming to save her, and that is her entire role, to be the motivation for the male protagonist. And in a lot of cases, there has been a very bad portrayal of female characters in either video games or films, where we like jump from one type of archetype to another. Right? From damsel to distress to Mary Sue, where she's just like flawless. She's a flawless action hero. And well, here's the thing: flawless characters are not very interesting. We are attracted to characters with flaws, and Hollywood doesn't know how to write female characters properly who actually feel like people. They are being reduced to a specific archetype, really.
But also, you're with this doctor. Did you have to see a psychologist there, or was it just this doctor? Or were there other people that you had to go through?
There were no other people. No. It's like you were paying the psychologist, apparently, like through him. But all they were doing is just checking the answers on your
so you
test.
Didn't even talk to
no,
them.
I haven't talked to any psychologists, but they are being paid. They were being paid for the process. Basically. And I haven't gotten like the results of that test until like half a year later. And I was already on hormones for a while, for a couple of months. Did the hormones
make you develop like female characteristics?
Well, here's the thing: what those hormones do, at least estrogen, right? It will give you softer skin. It will change your fat redistribution, so you develop more of that in like lower part of your body. Like you get more. Yeah, I haven't had much of a breast development. I have some, but they're so tiny that like if I'm wearing longer clothes, like no one can see it. But if I take my clothes, you can notice it sticks out like a white boy in South Central. But it's okay. I'm sort of glad that I didn't develop a lot of those the breast tissue.
Did your voice change? Did it go lighter? Or?
A lot of people would say that your voice doesn't change on estrogen, that you have to take like voice lessons and things like that. I think it's a lie, really. I think that estrogen changes your voice. It definitely feminizes it, especially over time. I think it happens naturally also.
Did it change the way you think? Did it change your mental state?
Yes. And I think a lot of people ignore that it's just a physical change, but hormones affect your mentality as well.
In what way?
Well, first of all, you become way more emotional than before.
Yeah.
And I was never as emotional as I was back when I was on estrogen. It was like every little thing was,
Really?
Yeah.
Like watching a movie made you cry? Or
I mean,
like
I still cry watching certain films. There are some of my favorite films that will like always make me cry. Jacob's Ladder is one of those examples. I think it's a really, really beautiful psychological horror film. I love psychological horror, by the way. Yeah. But it was like on a much higher level than that. It's like goes beyond like this because I always like to say that I am a sensitive person, but I'm not an emotional person. I'm sensitive in the sense that I am very sensitive to like aesthetics, to beauty, especially like in nature, in art. I appreciate things like music or films. It gets a like sensitive reaction out of me. But I'm not someone who like reacts to things emotionally usually. But estrogen changed that absolutely. So I was reacting in a purely emotional way a lot of the time, and So I think there's definitely like psychological differences between males and females, and I
But
think
were they positive or negative emotions that you, or were they both that
well,
were just exaggerated and stronger?
both
Yeah.
both I would say, yeah, but a lot of negative emotions.
Yeah,
for me, at
depression,
least.
sadness, loneliness.
Yes, yes. Oh well, maybe not loneliness, but you could say like you're feeling things much stronger. Like sadness, but also anger as well.
Yeah.
But the same happens with testosterone as well. A lot of the time, that's why a lot of teenagers have those mental breakdowns. Those angry outbursts, that happen. They're like, especially like in an early stage when you're being exposed to a certain hormone, because like you're going through a second puberty when you start taking HRT.
But how long were you on these estrogen and these medications? How long of a period was that?
In total, that was 2.5 years.
Before you went to the next step. So that you,
no. Before I had surgery, that was 2 years.
2 years. So in that period, did you ever like feel like, I regret this. I should stop taking these. Did you ever have like feelings of regret already?
No,
then
not at all. Not at all. I was quite happy with it, to be honest. And
even though it made you really emotional and also sad.
I mean, there was more than just making you emotional. There was a certain specific side effect I was experiencing, which is brain fog.
Yeah.
Right. And it made it much harder for me to think. Like I wasn't thinking clearly.
Wow.
I had problems with, my ability to focus or like even make logical connections, things like that. And I said it to someone like after I started taking estrogen, I had this experience, and he said, "Well, of course. I mean, men are much more smarter than women. Of course, you became dumber." I'm like, that's not the case.
No.
That's not the case at all. If you think about it, the levels of intelligence between males and females are like approximately the same. They're like aligned. I mean, like the difference is that among geniuses and people with very low IQ, there's higher representation of males on both sides.
On both sides?
Yes, yes. But around the middle,
it's the same. Yeah.
It's pretty much the same.
But I know that biologically, women as a group tend more towards negative emotions than men usually do. If you see it statistically, that's one of the differences. If you want to see some of the differences statistically, that is one of them.
Yes, well, I mean, you could say women are a little more neurotic than men.
Yeah,
definitely.
That perhaps because of estrogen is.
I mean, yeah, there's also like a lot of negative ways testosterone affects you as well, right? And I had experience with both, so I know more or less what I'm talking about, from my own experience.
But in this period of 2 years where you're taking estrogen, are you like, have you already decided then that you're gonna go this route of going through gender surgery, or was this something that you was thinking about during that period of time, or when did you like finally decide that is what's right for me?
So when I first started taking estrogen, I was convinced that I didn't want the surgery, even though I hated my genitals, right? But I remember having this conversation with my mom, and my mom said that, well, if you want to be a woman, it's better if you just go all the way and you get the surgery, right? And when she said that, I don't think she actually realizes just what goes into this sort of surgery. That it does not give you a real vagina, right? Like that's not what you get. And I don't think she realized it, just how dangerous the surgery can be, or about possible complications. I think she just wanted the best for me in that sense. And well, I said I didn't really want it, especially when I was thinking of dilation. And it is a process after a surgery. You have to insert like this plastic object like in there to stop it from closing, and that is something you have to do several times a day.
I see.
Like 2-3 times a day.
It's almost like when you're getting a hole in your
hour.
ear, you have to make sure it doesn't close.
Yeah. It's exactly like that, because if you think about it, it is not really a vagina, it is an open wound.
Yeah.
Right. And what happens when you have a wound? Well, it wants to close, right? And another thing is, like, if you think about the length of your vaginal tunnel, let's call it, it usually like closes in the middle, so it closes like this.
Yeah.
And what happens, like, you might have like some little depth in the opening, then here it closes. But what happens here is you have this air bubble inside of you.
Yeah.
And inside that air bubble, there's all sorts of bacteria that can form there. There's everything you can imagine is there, and that leads to the possibility of development of sepsis and like blood infections, all of that. Yes, absolutely. It is dangerous. And there's another thing, right? If you had scrotal graft, which is it's your scrotum that is being inverted like into the vagina, because there wasn't enough penile tissue. And you know what happens on your balls? That's where hair is growing, right? And you are having your hair on your bollocks removed with a laser before the surgery.
I see.
But, well, what happens if you're taking hormones after your surgery? You might experience some hair growth there. I had facial hair removal on my but laser 3 times. I still have like some hair left.
Does it grow back somehow?
I mean, it wasn't completely removed. Like, you can't remove all of it, right? And like, it will be very hard for me to grow any, even when I'm on testosterone. Like, it won't grow because like it's
not there.
Like the source, right? Like the very seed is removed. So, but I still have like some here.
Yeah.
And there's probably like some growing inside of you. And now imagine like those hairs locked in that air bubble, all those bacterias. It's a mess. It's a mess. And
they don't tell you about that.
No. And that is the reason why I don't recommend anyone getting the surgery, even if you're really dysphoric about your genitals. It might be better to actually live with it than going through that surgery. Especially, this surgery, it's been like many decades since they started performing those surgeries. I think the first one was like in the 60s, or was it 50s? Somewhere around that time, And for those 60, 70 years, there has been no progress regarding those surgeries. It's still the same. So basically, it's still in its early experimental phase. It's an experimental stage with it. And really, if you think about it, it is sort of a transhumanist process, right? Like you're transcending something. Like in this case, you want to transcend your sex. And I do believe it will be possible in the future. But with what we have available currently regarding medicine and technology, it is not possible.
No, it's a crude and mechanical, because we're not taking into account how extremely complex the human body is. And especially also the female human body is like, you can't just take, remove the penis and create a hole. It's like such a simplistic way to think about it, how extremely complex systems and hormones and cells and everything is like, it's impossible to create that. It's like it's so complex. It's almost like playing God. Like, we can just mold you into whatever you want to be. Like, no, we can't. And nobody tells you about the things that you're talking about. How now is that you won't look like a perfect woman. It won't feel like a perfect woman. It will be lots of side effects and lots of difficulties and complications and difficult to live with, because it's like a utopia, like thinking that you will become a perfect female doing this.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a level of fantasy,
Yeah.
like the way you fantasize yourself as the opposite gender. You have this ideal, like in your head, and trying to live up to it, but you never will live up to that. Like it's impossible. And even if you have an ideal of yourself as as a perfect man, you will probably never live up to that as well, right?
No, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, you're being sort of I feel like an imitation of a woman rather than a woman, to be honest. And perhaps for some people that is enough to make them feel satisfied.
Yeah,
but that wasn't it for me. Like I didn't want to be a trans woman. I wanted to be a woman.
Yeah.
And that is impossible to achieve. That's why I think it's such a healthy attitude to have. That you know what, I am trans and I'm proud of it. I'm happy about it. I'm not trying to be a biological woman, or I'm not trying to be a biological man. I'm happy with what I have, This was my life. This is the best I could do with my life,
Yeah.
And like Buck Angel, he has this sort of attitude, right? And I think it's super healthy. I think this idea that I am just like a biological woman, I am just like a biological man, it will only lead to disappointment. And I think the reason people say that is because they want to avoid this uncomfortable truth, is that I can never, ever possibly become that. And another thing I've noticed that some post-surgery trans women say is that their vaginas are better than biological women's vaginas because they are like brand designed and all of that. And I think, when people say that, it's sort of a compensation for probably how they really feel about it.
Well, you're in this process, those 2 years taking estrogen, and then comes... when do you decide that, okay, I want to do the surgery, and how it was like that 1 year in, or when do you come to that point?
That was like at some point throughout my transition. I think, like a couple of months in, I started considering it. And it was mostly because, well, I felt like now in all of those other ways I am a woman, or like how I would say now, like a woman. So I wanted to like go with her completely, because I didn't want there to be any differences between me and biological women.
Yeah.
Something, like I said, is something you can't achieve, right?
So then you tell the doctor, I want to go do this all the way, and how can I do it? Did you have to apply for that, or were there any requirements to go to that next step, or was it just like sign here, pay here? Let's go.
So the way I went about it is that I got in touch with Esben, Esther, Pirelli, Benestad, which is a privately practicing doctor here in Norway, who's been treating a lot of transgender patients before. And we've met, and I had three appointments with him in Grimstad, where he operates. And on our third appointment, he wrote this recommendation letter that I ended up sending to the surgeon in Thailand. A surgeon in Thailand who I was also in touch with for, I think, half a year before surgery. Yeah.
Why did you go to Esben, Esther, Pirelli? Why were you recommended him, or why did you go there?
I was sort of, first of all, I was getting tired of getting the hormones from a different country. So it'll be much easier for me to have access to that this way, instead of actually going to Poland like every 3 months and refilling on that, buying hormones there and coming back here. So I was like, well, it would be much easier if I could just buy it in the local pharmacy. Right? Like, practically speaking. And that's why I got in touch with Benestad, because I wasn't able to go through like the official national treatment, especially like they are not very positive to anyone who has started taking hormones elsewhere, because they have not been through their system, and they have like the strict way of looking at it. You have to do it our way. So that was my only option here in Norway. And so when he wrote that letter of recommendation, it was like before I exited the office that he said that you should probably think a lot about it, think it through on your way home. I think like this is something you say before you write a recommendation letter, right? It's not something you take up after that.
Yeah,
and I was like, yeah, I will. I mean, of course I didn't.
What did you think of your experience with him, with Esben Esther?
At the time, I was happy because it was effective. It went very quickly, sort of like the same, as with that doctor in Poland. But like I said, it's a matter of perspective. Now that I'm looking at it, I think it's very, very unprofessional, and I don't think he should have this right to treat patients.
I think he lost his license partly.
Yeah, but he regained the license, so he has it back.
Yeah,
but I think his role as a doctor is limited right now.
Yeah. And then you get this letter of recommendation, and then why did you send it to Thailand? Why not go back to Poland and get the surgery? Why Thailand?
Oh, I mean, I was considering that. That was option A.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is that, you have to go through this process of like officially changing your sex, like on your documents and all of that. And that is a process that, first of all, you have to go to the court, and you have to sue your own parents.
Oh, really?
Yes. You have to sue your own parents that they assigned you the wrong gender at birth.
Wow.
That's how it works in Poland. Like it's crazy. It's just as crazy as it sounds.
Even if you're above 18
and an adult? You still have to do that. Wow. And my parents were not happy about it. They were like, we are not going to any court.
No.
Like, we're not going back to Poland to go to the court. And, through the whole process, it also costs. So, you need a lawyer.
Yeah.
And apparently there's a lawyer who was connected to that doctor.
Yeah.
That I was visiting in Poland. So I paid him the money. And I was waiting for, at that point, it was almost a year. Forget if it was like around a year. Nothing happened. This case hasn't moved at all. I was robbed of my money.
Mm-hmm. A lot of money?
It was approximately 20-ish thousand, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I demanded to have the money back.
Did you get it?
Yes, I did eventually.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had to lie that I had like a crisis situation, and I need to say no because I need this money right now. I lied about it, and I got the money back. It was a very stressful situation back there.
I can imagine.
And,
so you didn't want to sue your parents, so then you have to look at other alternatives. So how did you end up with Thailand? Were you recommended it, or was that the only option?
Well, I looked at like different surgeons in different countries.
Yeah.
And the problem is that in most of those cases, you are required to have your sex change in your passport. But I have Polish citizenship. I could not change the sex in my passport unless I sued my parents. So I wasn't eligible to go to most of the surgeons. So I found one surgeon in Thailand who was okay with you not having it change your sex like officially in your documents. So that was like the only option.
You just wanted money. That's okay. You don't need no passport.
Exactly.
Give me money.
Exactly. I mean, that's the case, with most surgeons and big pharma as well. It's all about money, and I think that's why they want more people to transition. They want more people on those hormones because
big business.
Yeah, it's a gold mine. Really, if you think about it.
I heard that these hormones and these puberty blockers that you call them if you're before puberty, that they cost a lot of money. Also here in Norway, it costs a lot.
But think about the whole health consequences of like puberty blockers. Well, first of all, there's some risk that you will become sterile. When you're on puberty blockers, there's higher chance of that when you're on hormones, but like some level of that is possible there. And people will say, like, the counter argument is that, well, is it so important for people to have kids? And that is a perspective that a lot of time changes when you age.
Yeah.
When you're young,
Yeah,
you
of
might not
course.
feel like you want to have kids.
No, of course
but
not.
and that might not always be the case. You might at some point you might start feeling like you do want to have kids. And even though like I'm not a parent, I sort of like at some point, you start to feel this need that like you want to share your knowledge, your wisdom with someone younger than you, like guide them. You know what I mean? And there has always been this case when you have a student and the older master or teacher, sort of, and I also think there's a very thin line between that and grooming. Grooming is sort of based in that as well, right? So there's very, very, very thin line there, and puberty blockers, right? What about your skeletal development,
bone
right?
density.
Your bone density, all of that, or brain development.
Yes.
Like you are required to go through puberty for your brain to develop properly.
Yeah, and also a side note on that is that when we're not taking into account the fact that a lot of people before puberty, if they're having these thoughts of, oh, I want to transition, I want to be another gender, they're not getting they're not being allowed the process of going through puberty and perhaps changing that perspective, going out of puberty and saying, oh, thank God I didn't do that. Now I don't have those thoughts or feelings at all because I went through puberty. But if you go get on puberty blockers, you pause that process, so you never go through that process. So you're stuck in that mindset and that feeling of feeling in the wrong gender and wrong body.
And that puberty might even help you find out that you're a guy.
Yeah,
right.
And
another thing is like, well, let's say you're 10, 11 years old, you go on puberty blockers because you're certain you're the opposite gender at that age. Well, how many ways you view yourself now is different from how you viewed yourself when you were 10-year-old. And we think of those things as set in stone. At the same time, we're also saying that gender is fluid. But it's fluid but set in stone, right? That's just impossible.
But you're going to Thailand, and then what happens in Thailand and when you go there?
Right. So my experience with Thailand and the whole surgery there is very foggy, to be honest. It's like I don't even remember what Thailand looked like, to be honest. It's like this tunnel vision. Like the surgery was all you cared about, and I mean, one of the few things I remember is that the air was very like heavy in Thailand, very hard to breathe. There's a lot of pollution in the air, right? And then at the hotel I was staying a day before my surgery, there was a lizard in my room. There was a gecko in my room, in my hotel room.
That's
right?
a quality sign.
yeah, you could say that. I love lizards. I love reptiles. So for me that was fine. I tried to play with it, and well, after that, it was the next morning after that night at the hotel when I got to the clinic. And at the clinic, well, first, they record you in a similar way to what we're doing right now, and ask you like to state certain questions. They ask you certain questions. They ask you to state certain things, all of that. They show you the pictures of the surgery, like during the surgery and like post surgery, like the healing effect and all of that. And I remember like some of those post pictures of those neo vaginas. I was like, they look nothing like my result. Like what I got was something completely different. And apparently it's like the same surgeon. I'm like, are those pictures fake?
Yeah, probably.
Because they looked like, like
Photoshop.
real vaginas.
Yeah.
It could be Photoshop. I don't know. But like, I think it's like one big scam in that way.
Yeah.
so after that, I had to sign this agreement.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm agreeing to all of this, and then they listed like potential complications
Yeah.
you might get from surgery. And those are things like necrosis, swelling, bleeding. What else? Like some scar tissue granulation, all of that, and those were things I was aware of before going there. But a lot of some of the complications I got weren't listed there
Mm-hmm.
at all. So it's not like the complications I was experiencing were there
Mm-hmm.
at all. And it's not that unusual because it happens to other people as well. So I was there. I was agreeing to that. I was getting more and more nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even that I was nervous because I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to regret it. I'm going to regret it. It was more like, what if something goes wrong? What if this is the last day of my life? What if I either die during the surgery or something really, really bad happens? What if I get some really, really bad infection and die from it?
Were you alone, or did someone travel with you?
I was completely alone.
Why didn't anyone travel with you, like your parents or a friend or anyone?
Well, my parents wouldn't do that. That's thing number one. And then another second thing is I had a boyfriend at the time.
Yeah.
Right. But I was in this relationship mostly because, well, he asked and I said yes.
Okay.
Because I didn't know how to say no at the time. Like, that was a completely different. Right. It was like the first guy who asked me. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Sure.
I wasn't even aware of like my attraction to men at the time. So there was like, it was very, very one-sided. But I was in it because I was, I guess, yeah. I mean, it sort of affirms your belief that you are a woman when a straight guy is interested in you, and that was all it was about, right?
Yeah. But he didn't want to. Did he ask to join you over there, or did he want to go?
He had to stay in Norway and work.
Yeah.
And another thing is like his parents, who he was living with, weren't aware that I was trans.
I see.
So it will be difficult to explain why he's going to Thailand with me. So I went.
But was it long? Did you feel loneliness going there alone?
Oh yeah, definitely. And then you're. Just living in your head for like 2-3 weeks. Yeah. And it got really bad. And then, all you're feeling is like a post-surgery pain. And you're all on your own. Shit. Yeah.
Did you get a lot of pain blockers or relievers or medication?
Yes. Very, very strong ones. Yeah. Which I actually continued taking later on as well.
But did you instantly regret it?
After the surgery.
Or before the surgery?
No, not before the surgery. No. But I had those thoughts that I don't want to do this. Right before the surgery. But it was mostly because I was scared something's going to go wrong. Right?
Because that's what I think I read in like VG, the newspaper in Norway. Yeah. That they highlighted a lot about you feeling like, I don't want to do this right before.
Yeah, but they didn't really like specify what the reasons for that was, and it was not like, oh, I was regretting it. It was more like I was scared that something can go wrong, and even before I woke up, before the very surgery, I had to like strip down naked, with taking pictures of me, and I think this is the first time I like exposed my genitals to someone. I absolutely hated that. And they take like my blood pressure. I remember my heart rate was really, really high at that time, because I was in a state of panic.
Yeah. Jesus.
And when you go into the operation room, like I really don't remember any details other than like colors. I remember like the green on all the people there, the surgeon and all those nurses who were there. A lot of blue, white lights, very, very, very strong lights. And lights was basically like the last thing I have seen before I dozed off to sleep.
Did you feel cared for? Did you feel like they cared about you as a person and patient? Or?
Well, I haven't really talked much to them. They were all basically just like boom, 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 boom. Let's get things done.
Did they speak English well, or did they understand you?
Yeah. They were speaking English. I think that the only person who talked with me like right before surgery was the anesthesiologist. Right when they insert like the needle, if you and they like draw you up to get you to sleep, you get anesthesia, and he asked me where I'm from. Well, I said Norway, and they asked if I'm from Oslo. And I said, no, but not that far from Oslo, like 2 hours drive. And that was like the last conversation I had. And after that, they tell you to like start counting down from 10, right? And like you don't remember where you stop from like 10 to 1. You don't remember that. You just follow. And it was the second time in my whole life that I was like asleep under anesthesia.
Yeah.
Another procedure I had when I was 5 years old, and I had this polyp in my throat, which had to be removed. It was basically like blocking, like my
airway.
throat. Yeah, I mean, it made it hard to breathe, but also very, very hard to swallow food.
Yeah.
I had a big problem eating when I was a kid because of that, So I had that removed when I was a kid, and that was the first time I was like under anesthesia and sleeping. And it was exactly the same. And like you don't dream when you're under anesthesia.
It's just blank.
Yeah,
afterwards.
it's like being dead for a while, Like if when you're sleeping, when you're dreaming, you still have this sense of passage of time that happens, right? When you're under anesthesia, it's not. It's just like, boom, you're back. You're waking up. So yeah, it's like being temporarily dead.
So what was it like waking up? What happened then when you wake up?
Well, when I woke up, everything was blurry, like foggy. Like when you open your eyes, I wasn't fully aware of what was going on. Right. So what happened is that I just wanted to know what time it is, and I thought I was at home, like here. I didn't know I was in Thailand. I didn't know I was in some clinic in Bangkok. Like that's the last thing I would think of. But when someone told me like what time it is, I realized who that was, and I realized where I was and what happened, right? But for a while, I was convinced that I didn't have the surgery, because like have some patients experience sort of like ghost limb after either like your leg or arm is removed, and you feel like you're still moving your hand, your fingers, all of that. There's this sensation memory, muscle memory, all of that. Well, I had that too, because it felt like everything down there was still there.
Yeah.
It felt just like that.
Did that give you a sense of relief, or were you disappointed then? Did you hope that you didn't have the surgery?
I wasn't even sure. I was hoping I didn't have the surgery, because that means I don't have to go through like the whole process of like what's coming like post-surgery, right?
Yeah.
And so people would say that, I regret not having a penis anymore, and that is not the case. I never liked it, and I feel comfortable not having it. But when you take into consideration all the complications and everything, you realize one thing: like it was not worth it. It was not worth it at all. And what you end up having is even worse, right? Like now it reminds you of its presence just as much as it did before, for other reasons, of course. But there's this bag that they gave me on the first day. I think very, very shortly after the surgery, maybe like 1-2 hours after I woke up. Yeah, I had the surgeon come in, and there's nurses. They gave me this bag. What was in the bag was my testicles.
Oh,
it was like blood, a lot of like tissue and all of that, and testicles that were there. And you could like touch it through the plastic bag, right? And if you squeeze them like between your finger and your thumb like this, they shoot. I thought I was really funny. So when I was
Oh
at the
my
hospital, I
God.
was doing that. I was literally playing with my balls, you know?
You got served your balls.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. That was like a horror movie.
Yeah, I think it could be traumatic for a lot of people. I thought I was
Oh my
funny,
God.
hilarious. I didn't keep it. I didn't even ask me if I wanted to keep it. I would keep it. I would hang it somewhere on the wall.
That's so crazy.
Hey, what's in your what's in
Souvenir.
your pockets? That's my balls.
What'd you think? That is so crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Did you keep them or did you
No,
throw
no,
it away?
they didn't ask me if I wanted to keep it. They'd taken it from me. I got it for like a short while, and then they're just taking it from me.
One last like moment of contact.
Yeah, exactly that. But it it cemented this idea that the surgery actually did happen. You know, it wasn't just in my head.
So that's like a process that they
and
do
then
on
like you're
purpose.
connected to all its tubes, right? This one like draining your blood. So there's like this bay of blood right next to your bed, and then there's another tube that's the catheter that goes inside your urethra. Well, that's where you're peeing out of it. And it goes like into your bladder, and it takes like urine all the way from there. And on the second day after the surgery, they told me to stand and walk after just one day.
Okay.
I think that's brutal.
Yeah.
I don't think that should be a thing, to be honest. And it was like 2 days after the surgery, like on the first day I had surgery. On the third day, I had already to leave for the hotel. Like you're only staying at the clinic for 3 days. That's all. So on the second day, I had to like learn to walk. And another thing is after the anesthesia, my entire right foot was numb.
Wow.
Like I didn't feel my foot at all, and part of my leg as well.
Had they damaged some nerves or something?
I'm not sure what happened. I regained it completely after a couple of months.
Okay.
It took me months to regain all sensation in my right foot, in my right leg.
And do you think they did a professional medical job, or technically, or did they damage you in some way? Like other than like ethical stuff, but did they do like a good medical job if you isolate that?
No,
thing?
I think it was absolute butchery.
Really?
Yeah. And we're gonna get into like medical complications later.
Yeah.
But it's just like to take you for like the whole journey with clinic and the hotel afterwards. So on the third day, I had the package and the bandages removed, right? And when you're seeing that, it looked like like if someone was to beat you to a bloody pulp. Like imagine what your face would look like if someone like Mike Tyson were to punch you like 200 times in your face. It would be unrecognizable. That's what it looked like down there. It was like red and blue and swollen, like really disgusting.
Jesus.
It looked like a crime scene, to be honest. And at that point, I have seen some videos on YouTube of people who have their new parts unpacked. And they're like so happy about it. It looks great. It was nothing like that.
Really?
Like that's where reality, actually meets you. That's where you meet reality. And at that point, I was completely quiet after that. And when I was waiting for the taxi to take me to the hotel, it was just me and one of those nurses in that room.
So they joined you going to the hotel, or
no. I was alone at the hotel.
Okay.
But like at the clinic at the time, it was the nurse was with me at that room before the taxi arrived, and I was just staring at a wall. Just completely blank. Like, what have I done? Like, this is an absolute disaster. And I think like she could tell I wasn't happy the way she was looking at me. And then, the taxi arrives and what do you have to do? Well, you have to get up and walk much longer distance than the previous day. That was very, very hard for me. Getting to the hotel, and pushed through somehow, And then I was at a hotel for more than that. Yeah, 2 weeks, something like that. And then you're completely on your own, and you also have to desensitize and clean your wounds all on your own. They just show you how to do it once, and you have to do it 2 times a day.
Did they mess up medically, or did they say this is normal, your result is normal? Or?
They said it was normal. They would say it was normal, but I have parts of it that are numb. There's zero sensation there whatsoever. I haven't lost nerve connection there, so I'm capable of orgasm and ejaculation as well, because that's a lot of people find it surprising that you're able to ejaculate after a surgery like that. But the thing is, most of that seminal fluid is not coming from your testicles. It's coming from your prostate, and your prostate is unaffected, so it's still doing its job.
Because there are a lot of different techniques I've read, like you have this inversion, and you have these vaginoplasty, and all these. Are there different methods that you do to?
Well, they're mostly very similar. They're all using penile inversion.
Yeah, you invert everything.
To go into details, it's very graphic. But you cut alongside the penis. You remove the gland and the skin. Most of the erectile tissue is removed. I have a lot of it in my case, actually. And then. The skin of it, you insert and you put it inside and you stretch it.
So it's just practically inverting.
Yeah, it's an inverted glove. Think of it that way. And in my case, they also use the skin from the scrotum, the scrotal graft. That's what it's called. In some cases, there's another method, and that one is using part of your colon. It's very, very dangerous, right? Because removing part of your colon comes with many complications that otherwise, you wouldn't have to face. And another thing, I really hate how this is being promoted, because it allows you to have natural lubrication, right? Because those so-called new vaginas, they don't self-lubricate like a natural vagina would, right? But if it's made out of colon, it would naturally lubricate.
Oh, I see.
And it's sold that way as an idea. Hey, if you take this surgery, you will have natural lubrication. And I think it's preying on naive people,
desperate people.
Yeah, and desperate people, absolutely. And you can imagine what a colon smells like. Yeah. Now, your newly created new vagina is going to smell just like your ass. You get a second ass, secondary ass in the front. That doesn't sound very appealing now, does it? Yeah. But that's the reality of
that's what they're trying to sell.
The surgery, right?
But then, do you think you would have had a much better medical result if you did it in Norway or in Poland, or do you think it would have been the same result anyway?
It's hard to say. Thailand has some of the best surgeons. They have been doing it for such a long time, and more often, the surgeon here in Norway, doesn't do as many surgeries as someone in Thailand, who gets people from all over the Western world coming in and doing those surgeries. And it's usually not people from Thailand who are doing those surgeries in Bangkok. It's people from Europe or America, right? And another interesting thing is a lot of trans people in Thailand, they're proud of their trans identity. They're not trying to be women. They want to be transformed. And, a lot of the time in the past, I used to think of lady boy as an insult. So it's a slur. But they they just proudly call themselves lady boys. I'm not a guy. I'm not a girl, I'm a lady boy.
Yeah,
and
something
that's
in
like,
between. Yeah.
yeah, like their own category. And I think that's cool. I think that's really cool, actually. You know, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Much less dangerous when it comes to the medical part and everything. Like you just stay the biology that you are, and you can just like do whatever you want socially and be a lady boy if you want to, right? It's like much less dangerous for your biology and for your body.
Definitely. You know, and so
you regret it like instantly. You regret the process.
Well,
after the surgery.
it's not like I absolutely directly regretted and wanted to detransition. I was just like in a state of shock and experienced a lot of medical trauma associated with that surgery. Yeah, and sometimes they would take me back to the clinic from the hotel, pick me up, and go to the clinic to take out the catheter out of my urethra and see if I could urinate. And for that time, I would stay at the clinic for 2 hours, and they would give me a lot of stuff to drink. It was mostly Pepsi, because I don't think they had anything else to give me. Like it was just water and Pepsi, and that's what I was drinking. I had to drink a lot of it for 2 hours just to urinate and see if it was possible. And then I would sit down on the toilet. Nothing was coming out whatsoever. So they would catheterize you again, and well, the experience of being catheterized in that way, the way I'll describe it, is like being stabbed with a knife, like having a knife inserted inside you and taken out of you. I was screaming.
Oh my God.
I was like screaming on that hospital bed and whirling my body like this.
Why didn't you get more like painkillers?
I don't think there's any painkiller that could help you with a pain like this. It's not like a migraine that painkillers can help you with that. It's a sharp pain. It's like, I mean, if someone took a saw and started to cut you in half, starting from your ass and going down to your neck, like there's no painkiller that will help you with that type of pain, right? I have a vision of a couple of horror films I have in mind right now, actually, but it's an absolutely insane pain, you know. And also another thing was that my urethra, it tightened. So it wasn't as, widely open as it was before. It's smaller now. So it's even more painful to insert a catheter into a very, very tiny hole. And, like the whole area was sore and swollen. So it's an absolutely insane pain, right? But so I took like several trips like that when they were doing it over and over again until I was able to pee. And until that, I was just walking around with a bag of urine connected to my body that you have to empty every once in a while. And for a while, like my urine in the bag was absolutely brown. Like it wasn't like a normal color. It was very, very dark.
Why was that? Because you weren't getting enough fluids, or
could be. I also know that there's a lot of people who have like liver failure or something like that. Like I know someone who works in a hospital and said they've seen urine as dark as this, like right before the patient dies.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
It's encouraging.
Oh yeah, very, very. So like, I was trying to drink, but I was also like so tired all the time. I wasn't able to do anything. And so, my flight back to Norway, back home, was coming near, and I still wasn't able to pee on my own. And it was only like day before the flight that I finally managed it.
Wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't know if I had to stay longer, cancel my flight, go back home with this thing, catheter, and then trust that Norwegian doctors here will know how to remove it and all of that. God. So, you can imagine the kind of thoughts that were going through my head. Like, what do I do now? So I was lucky that just like a day before the flight, I was finally able to urinate.
And then
and of course, when there's blood coming out when you're urinating and things like that. It was also like day before the flight that they
Yeah.
showed me how to dilate.
Ah, I
Like,
see.
this thing you insert. It's really painful. It's sort of like stretching all your inner muscles like that. It's absolutely painful.
You have to do that all the time. You still have to do that.
I haven't been doing that for 9 years.
Okay, so it was just in the start.
I mean, technically you have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like for the first half a year, you have to do it every day, 3 times a day.
Okay.
After that, I think after the first half a year, you just limit it to once a day. After the first year or so, it's just like once a week or things like that. Yeah, and eventually you just have to do it like once a month or something like that. So because it closes in this early stage. But I stopped very early because I just had enough of it, and at that point I was like, people were saying you'll have really, really bad complications if you stop doing this when it closes. And it's this thing we talked about, like it closing in the middle, all those possibility for infection. I'm still alive.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Thankfully.
But what is going on inside there, I don't know, and I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm living on a borrowed time.
Yeah.
Somehow, and just trying to get the best out of what I have, because I don't know when something can go really wrong.
Yeah, still.
Yeah. I mean, there's a possibility, and then there's and it happened to people even like 10 years after surgery or 15 years after surgery, where you have prolapse when all's like falls out.
I see.
And that's a horror scenario. And I'm not saying it to scare people. I mean, I think it can be a good idea to be scared of it, so you know what you're getting into.
Be informed about it.
Just know what those surgeries actually are and what complications can be.
Because I want to say here also is that I had this lady on, Miriam Hetland, who's a teacher here in Kolbotn, outside of Oslo, and we were going through all the school books. She had like a large stable of school books that they teach in elementary school and high school here in Norway. And we were talking about, we were going through all the chapters in all the different books where they talk about gender ideology. And they were actually showing examples, full page example of people who had gone through the process that you're describing now with gender-corrected surgery. And what I was reacting to, and also she, is that they only talk about the positive stories where everybody's happy, nobody regrets it, it's all good, life is so much better after surgery. And I was like, oh my God, it's like if we're going to teach children about this stuff, I'm not even sure we should, but let's say if we're going to teach them about this stuff, at least we should have a balanced perspective. At least we should tell them about situations where people aren't happy with this, situations where people do regret this. Like if they're going to have a story about people happy with the results, they should also have a story about you. Like here's an example of somebody who who wasn't happy with this, who did regret this. And it's like, what do we teach our kids? What do you think about that, having this kind of stuff in school books and elementary school, telling about gender surgery and that you can be whatever gender you want? What do you think about that whole concept?
Yeah. Well, so first and foremost, I think that this creates sort of a ideal fantasy of what it is, and it's like this happy la la land you can live with, like and if you just look at it, all those, it's very colorful, like the way you present with like trans and gayness, queerness in general, like, right? But it's not very realistic, like as a non-straight male, like my life is not a rainbow, I think that having it being so colorful appeals to kids, and then you have it conveyed from like very child-friendly ways, like often in the form of cartoons, right, or like colorful pictures and all of that, and it creates this idea that this is a way to be happy in your life. Second thing is that, well, if you tell kids that they can identify as anything they want, I mean, of course they will. right? Like kids have very, very active and vivid imagination, right? They can. I remember all the things I wanted to be when I was a kid. I wanted to be a sewer diver when I was 5 years old. That wasn't exactly my career choice, you know. But well, where the problem lies is that, like I said, gender is not something you can choose. You know, like even if you experiencing feeling like you're the opposite gender, that is not something you chose, and it confuses kids. And sometimes kids don't fully understand the concept at a fairly young age. So I mean, there was a case of a young girl who came home from kindergarten and started having panic attacks because she was afraid she will turn into a boy. Right? Because she was taught that you don't have to be the gender you were born as. And it's a very similar case to like how I misunderstood the concept of death. Like it's people burying people alive there. Kids don't understand those things really. Like I don't think we should start teaching about those things until like early teens. You know, I think that's a good time to start. But even then, there's the problem of how we approach it, right? And that's one of my issues with like sex ed in general. Like you can either go too far in one direction, and that is sort of like sex ed I had in Poland in middle school, where you know only like sex after marriage. Masturbation is a sin. If you do that, you will burn in hell, and you'll probably turn into a rapist. I mean, imagine, right? You're a young guy at that age, right? Your sex drive is developing, and you're being told, well, you're probably going to be a rapist, right? That's not healthy at all. I think it leads you to develop this very, very negative attitudes towards your own sexuality, which I still struggle with to this day because of my upbringing. And then if you go the other way, one of the first things I had, was like this Norwegian course before I went to high school here in Norway, and that was 2 years in total. And first this language course, but then I was like doing like primary school in a matter of I think 15 months or something like that. And we had like some sex ed. It's really funny because you have people who are like 18 or in their 20s, 30s, 40s, but even some people in their 50s, and you have like sex ed, like someone like teaching you about sex when there are people that who have kids. Like, it's a very funny scenario in that sense. But yeah, she was like, you can have sex with as many people as you want, and there are no consequences. And I think there are huge psychological consequences to having sex with as many people as you want, right? Your ability to bond. It affects your ability to bond. And a lot of people ignore it. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. And that's one of like the main issues with hookup culture, right?
But also back to, okay, so you had the surgery. Did you experience any kind of the like euphoria that other people are experiencing? Like, I'm so happy with my surgery. Were there any like, was there a point where you were like really happy with it, or did you? No, never.
No, at no point. Like I was very dissatisfied, and the way it looked was horrible. The whole healing process was horrible, and I had such bad complications that I didn't have time to be euphoric about anything, to be honest, or happy about anything for that reason. And on my way to the airport, I was running late for my plane, so it was almost took off without me. I had to run towards and imagine running like 2 weeks after your surgery, something must have opened up. I started bleeding on the airplane, and it's like, well, no, it wasn't a lot, but there was like some blood, right? I went to the toilet to check it out, and I'm like, well, what am I gonna do if something really, really bad happens? Like, you're sitting here on the airplane, you're stuck there for like 11 hours. If it went really bad and I would bleed to death, I would die there, because it's very unlikely that I would get any medical help on the airplane, like that. What do you do? Fortunately, it turned out okay. So I came home and I found out that when I'm urinating, the urine is coming out of like several openings, and they're like all of those small wounds, and it's coming out like this. There's like not one stream, and for a long time, my urethra was very, very tight, so it was hard for me to pass urine for first year. It turned out okay after the first year. It got better, but it's not as good as it was before. So it takes me longer to pee, but it's not as bad as some other people. I know Richie Herron. I don't know if you know.
No.
He's a detransitioned male from UK, and I had him on my channel as a guest, and he's very open about talking about this too. But to this day he has struggle urinating. It takes him like 15 to 30 minutes.
But did you get any like medical follow-up here in Norway? Did you have a connection with a hospital or a doctor, or was there any kind of did you receive any help?
No, nothing. And I didn't even want to. At that point I was like, I'm done with this. Whatever happens, happens. Like if I was to die, I accepted that fate. Really? Yeah. I was just fed up with all of this, to be honest.
But how long did it take you before you started thinking about detransitioning?
Well, a while, you could say, and my whole detransition process was long. It's not like it happened overnight. Can I just say something more about the complications before we go there? So, another complication I had straight after coming home, that's also like the first time I went to the toilet to, there's no better way of saying it. Like a solid feces, right? Like you produce. Before that, it was all very runny in the hospital, so I didn't really feel it as much. But when it got solid, I came home, and it felt like shitting razor blades.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And I was bleeding from my anus, and I discovered that I had this cut alongside my rectum. That happened during surgery.
Oh, unintentionally, like.
Yeah. And when you have a cut right there, it's like having a cut in your mouth right here. God. It's like you're moving it all the time, and well, it takes a long time to heal for that reason. Yeah, and it was so painful. So it lasted 4 years.
But you didn't go to a doctor with that either? You didn't...
Oh, I did.
Anyone? Yeah, you did?
I did.
How did they receive you then?
First, my GP checked it. It hurt a lot when she inserted, the finger in there. It was painful, but she didn't feel anything. So she sent me to a specialist in Porsgrunn. He checked it and said, I don't sense anything there. They were looking for polyps or something like that, or hemorrhoids. They didn't even know what they were looking for, to be honest. But
how did they react to you having the surgery done in Thailand and everything? Did they say anything about that?
No, not really. No. And that particular doctor didn't even know I had it. He just said that you have a lot of redness around your vagina. So you should get it checked out.
Yeah.
And I think it's surprising that it didn't know, because it doesn't look like a vagina. It just doesn't.
Also, they thought you were a woman.
Really? And in general, all this time when I was living as a trans woman, people thought I was a woman. I remember when I had a new doctor at the time, and I talked to him, and when he found out I was trans, he was like, "But you look like a girl." Yeah, and I think it's because people are only used to this idea that trans women look like men in dresses.
Yeah,
right?
But did you want to inform the doctor about you being trans, about the surgery that you had had?
I mean, no, my GP knew that I was having a surgery. So they knew about that. They knew about that. But yeah, no, regarding like this whole concept of like man in a dress,
Yeah.
that wasn't even how I was dressing. I had like a very, very tomboyish
Okay.
style in
I
general.
see.
Like I wasn't like particularly feminine or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But okay, so but did you see the specialist and then later on you found that you wanted to detransition and regret the whole thing and try to restore yourself as a man or what? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like I said, long process, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the surgery definitely played a part in it, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
would have happened eventually, but because of the surgery, it happened earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that no matter how far you go, you can never achieve
Yeah.
that full synthesis.
Yeah.
So I remember this one thing. I said like I'm not a woman. I'm just a feminine guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think that was like the moment of realization. But even after that, I continued living as a trans woman.
Mm-hmm.
And half a year after the surgery, I stopped taking estrogen.
Okay.
And mostly just wanted to find out how is it gonna go without it. And yeah, I found out like I was fine without it. Like I didn't needed it. I didn't feel the need to take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I became really aware of the brain fog and this like cognitive block I had in my head, because after it wears off, it's when you're thinking much sharper and all of that. That's when you realize that, oh my God, something was really, really wrong during the time when I was estrogen. And if I wasn't on estrogen, I don't think I would make that decision to have the surgery. Because, like,
really,
yeah, it definitely affected
Wow.
that. To be honest,
People should know about that.
Yeah, and it's not like everyone is going to have the same side effect.
No.
So there's a variety of different side effects, and what you have listed there when when you're buying a certain drug, you have
but people don't read those.
A lot of time they don't, but even there you have like list of possible complications. Not all of the side effects are listed there too.
No.
And
not all of them apply to everyone, right?
Yeah, no, and it's it's interesting when it comes to like the cognitive function and estrogen in males, because even in males who don't take HRT, like hormonal replacement therapy, who don't take cross hormones, if a man develops higher estrogen level, it is usually done through obesity. Obese men have higher estrogen levels, right? I mean, not even obese, but even like overweight, right? Because like when we're talking obesity, we're talking about more extreme cases, right? But like even overweight, your body develops more estrogen as a male, and what that does is that you develop higher chance of developing dementia, either at earlier age or like developing at all, right? And there's research done about it, like about the presence of estrogen in male and how it affects their cognitive function. And there's another research on like care homes for elderly patients, and there's a higher rate of dementia and Alzheimer in transgender women than there is in biological women.
I see.
So, and it's not like everyone develops dementia either, right? There's like some people who will develop it, and then, well, the rate of that is much higher for trans people, right? And I think that trans people should take this seriously, because it is, and it's like we're in the same boat regarding that, like me and trans people. Like this is about our health, and when I'm saying this, it's not because I want to ban hormones, I want to ban transition, or because like I'm against you. No, I'm really, really concerned about those health issues and our cognitive function. because like I said, I think this whole thing is like an early experimental stage,
Yeah.
right? And it comes with consequences, and I don't think we're ready for that at this point. I think that eventually, at some point in the future, it will be possible to actually physically change your sex, even on chromosomal levels, like
Mhm.
turning XX into XY or XY into XX.
But at what
So-
point did you like really decide to reverse this or detransition? Which year was this?
Yeah, it didn't. It's not like it happened at a specific
Okay.
point. It was like a decision made over
Gradual.
time, very, very gradual. I guess at some point I just started dressing differently. That was the first time I bought some clothes in a men's section.
Yeah.
And I remember how weird that felt. It's
Mhm.
sort of like how weird it felt to buy women's clothes for the first time. It's like, it feels good, but at the same time, it feels so weird because you're not used to it. Yeah.
Did you miss looking like a man and miss looking being masculine again? Did you? What did you feel at
Yes.
home in
Yes,
that?
to some degree.
Yeah.
Eventually, I started thinking about it, and I went through this very androgynous phase
Yeah.
for a while. So in between like 2015 to 2017, I was going through this androgynous phase, but I didn't actually like officially detransition until 2016. So that was like a bit more than 2 years after my surgery,
But
where
did
I
you
was like, you know what? I am a man. And there was even for a while that I was calling myself, it's this term called the demi boy,
Mhm.
which basically means like part boy.
Yeah, almost.
And like in my case, it was because I still felt like I wasn't good enough to be a man.
Yeah.
And I think this sort of identity really attracts those people who feel insecure in their own gender role. And
But is there a medical aspect to detransitioning? Do you get like hormones and
Well,
what do you call them?
well, I don't
testosterone
just like I don't think there's one right way to transition. I don't think there's one right way to detransition, right?
But for you, did you get any medical help detransitioning?
Well, I just stopped taking estrogen.
So you didn't take like
I
testosterone.
Started dressing differently.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not like I started dressing that drastically differently. But yeah, but no, I didn't transition like medically.
No.
And a lot of the time, you get asked questions like, "Well, when are you going to have the penile reconstruction surgery?"
Is that
like,
possible?
No, it's not. It's not. I mean,
you can't reverse
I mean,
what's been done.
Depends what you mean by is it possible.
But to some extent, like
I mean, it is possible in the same way that it is possible for trans men to get a penis. It's very, very fake, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of trans men don't go for this surgery. Because I mean, for trans men, it's even worse. Like the results you get, and I think it's a healthy approach to not take the surgery. And in my case, it will be even more difficult.
Yeah.
You know why?
No.
Well, because if you're a female, right, and you transition to male, you're a trans man. Your clitoris is developing into a sort of a penis already. It's growing, right? And in some cases, it might even get this long, but usually something around this length, like it enlarged through testosterone. And it is easier to create a penis out of that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a natural clitoris which could grow into something. So it will be much more difficult for me, and the results would be even worse. And another thing is, well, about the complications of that surgery, like I've learned my lesson.
Yeah.
And that's the point here. I've learned my lesson. I'm not doing another surgery. And I don't think it's going to make me feel as more of a man if I do that. And besides, like, I'm kind of happy not having a penis in that sense. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm fine with it.
And I think it's really important for people who might be listening to this somewhere down the line, who perhaps were like you were when you were like 12 or 13 or something, that they hear that, hey, if you do this, if you go all the way and actually have surgery, you can't undo this. You can't reverse this. This this is it now.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely
really important
irreversible.
to say this so that people really hear this, not just these fantasy stories or you can be wherever you want. Like, no, if you do this, you can't reverse it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's not reversible, and like no matter what I do, I'm not going to be the man I would otherwise be. But on the other hand, it's not like I identify as a man or anything like that. I would say like I don't identify as anything, to be honest. I don't believe in the concept of identity. I think identity is bound in our tribal nature. We'll like try to hold on to this identity to make sense of ourselves and to make us different from others and to identify like with a specific group and all of that. I don't do that. That's why like I'm not doing identity. I'm not doing pronouns. I'm like, you can identify me as whatever you want, and you can call me whatever pronouns you want, but I'm not calling myself anything. I just exist. I perceive the world, I perceive the reality around me, and I make some sense of it. That's all I am. Otherwise, I have no idea who I am, and I'm not going to lie about it and create some sort of, fake persona for myself to make some sense of who I am. And I think deep down, none of us really know who we are. And it scares the hell out of us. Like this whole idea that you don't know who you are. But like, what about, your fundamental beliefs? Well, they must be coming from somewhere. Most likely, it's culturally dependent. It's most likely coming from your parents, your environment. If you strip all of that down, and then you delve into like, who is it that you actually are? What do you actually believe? And then you exist in like this metaphysical void of sort. It's a vacuum of sorts, and that's when you truly realize, like, I'm nobody. I am nobody, and it's fine. It's fine. I don't need to be anything more than that, And I think achieving this sort of state really does wonders when it comes to your ego and like your perception of self, all of that. So,
but how is your life now? Are you okay with existence? Are you happy? Are you depressed? What's your state?
I'm at peace. That's what I like to say. I'm at peace, and there's a meaning to my life, and I think that's the most important thing about it. And I'm not as much concerned about how I am. I'm more concerned about what I'm doing. So, I think it's good for me that I have some projects I can work on, and I'm working on music, but I'm also, like I said, writing a book on technology, right?
Yeah.
So I'm making YouTube videos that actually.
Yeah, what's your channel called, so that everybody hears?
Yeah, so the name of my channel is Aleksander L, and that's Aleksander with X. I don't consider myself a YouTuber, to be honest.
No.
I'm just a guy who's making videos and putting them out on YouTube. I don't really like that word YouTuber. I think like the world of YouTube is so fake. And a lot of people on YouTube, they just put out like fake personas about themselves. I used to make a sort of a parody of that. I think 3 years ago. I was posting like this comedy videos. They're not there anymore, but I might repost them at some point, which is basically like this playing on the concept that everything you post on YouTube is fake.
But what do you think about the way that detransitioners are received in society? Because one concrete thing that happened here in Norway is that you were supposed to, was it like give a talk or have an event at the place called Kulturhuset in Norway, which is like a place where you can have events and speeches and keynotes and whatever. And you were scheduled to do that, and then they canceled you because they said that you can't have this event about detransitioners without also having the opposite side of the case, like with people happy with their transitioning. What do you think about that whole stuff that you were canceled in that way?
Well, I think in many cases we are sort of invisible to the society as detransitioners. And
Why?
mostly because it's not something people want to think about or wish to think about. That goes for most people. And for the others, well, they actively don't want us to be seen.
Because they challenge their narrative that everything is
Sort of,
perfect.
yeah. Just, just my very existence does that. And before I was so honest and open about it this year, like before that, there was like no data or statistics that would tell you that I have detransitioned. Right? Because, well, no one kept an eye on me. And in a lot of cases when people like, if you regret your transition many years after your surgery, it might not get reported even. So I think it's more common than people think. Some people would say that's just 1%. I think it's more than that. Realistically speaking, I think it might be somewhere around 15%, like the regret rate or detransition rate. And also, I don't like at least how in Norwegian language we approach this subject, because we call all of it regret. And like detransition is not synonymous with regret. There are people who detransition for a variety of reasons. Some people might detransition because financial reasons. Some people might detransition because they find it, it's really, really hard living like this, right? Or where you get a lot of hate if you're living in a very conservative environment. It might be too much for you. You might detransition.
Yeah.
Or you might detransition for health reasons, like side effects you're facing from hormones. And there are people who have detransitioned for those reasons as well. So, it's not all regret. And even in my case, I wouldn't call it regret, because it's not like I regret being trans for a while. I think it was, an important part of my journey as a person. So it's not like I look back at all of it and
It was a phase.
regret it. It's more like, I think I needed to go through that for like my own development, like to find myself, to be who I am. So it's not like I'm looking back on it all negatively. No. It's just the surgery I regret, right?
Yeah.
But no, other than that, I think it was a positive experience that helped me quite a lot, and then it becomes really easier to relate to women as well, because if you sort of walked in their shoes for a while, there's a lot
literally.
of stuff you can relate to, right? Yep.
So you should be a good friend to women, like what it's like being them.
Well, like 90% of people I'm hanging out with are women.
Yeah.
Me and women, we get along really well, right? So it's not like I absolutely regret it. Regret was not the reason why I detransitioned.
Yeah.
The reason why I detransitioned, because I came to this realization that you shouldn't always pursue every need or every desire you have. Like we need some self-control. And it was the very fact that like I just wanted to accept myself for who I am rather than continue to deny it. It was purely about that, this realization that, maybe I can learn to live with this dysphoria in other ways than by challenging it. Because the more you focus on transition, the worse your dysphoria gets in a way, because you're paying so much attention to it. And then I was like, noticing other things about me I wasn't happy with, like, oh, this is not feminine enough, this and that. And well, if you start entertaining all of those ideas, it will never, ever, ever stop.
Yeah.
And so at some point, I was just like, you know what? I'm taking it as it is. It's fine. Like, it's fine. And that's when you achieve this peace, this inner peace in a way.
Aleksander, I think that's a good place to stop. That was a great sentence to let linger in the air, find peace. I think that's something that we all need to do. And it was really interesting and really nice to have you here in the podcast. It was really eye-opening. And
likewise.
And also, I think it's really important that your story gets heard by a lot of people, because there are not so many stories. I'm sure there are a lot of stories like yours, but there are not so many that we get to hear about. And I think that's important for society, for young kids who have a difficult life, mental health illnesses, difficult with their parents, difficult at school, getting bullied. that is not necessarily the case that the reason or the solution for you is to go and get gender surgery, right? It's important to highlight that it's not automatically that is what would save you, and that it's important to have a nuanced conversation, a nuanced debate, and have conversations about this at all. That's why I'm so opposed to Kulturhuset not letting you have that event, and that we should have not less of these conversations, we should have more of these conversations and using our ability to have free speech. And so I thank you again. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for sharing your story, which is a really personal and intimate story. It's not easy, I'm sure, talking about this to the public.
Oh, well, the more you talk about it, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
It's like settle into that.
That is good. But I thank you, and also thank you to everybody who has watched this and listened to it. All right.